It all begins when we discover that the terrifying celestial demonic cult possesses a dark force working in the shadows. In this desolate setting and under a red moon, a lone warrior stands out amidst numerous defeated enemies. Blood drips from his fists, showing that the recent battle was extremely violent and demanded a great deal of his strength. This man and his group's main mission is to protect the young cult leader at all costs. Silent footsteps echo through the darkness as new enemies slowly begin to approach for combat. Officially, these warriors are known only as the alter egos of the young cult leader, but unofficially, everyone just calls them the young leader's dogs because of their blind obedience. They underwent inhumane training and mastered the most dangerous secret arts of the demonic cult. Their strength is undeniable, but the wounded warrior wants to know who those standing before him now are. They don't know who their parents are or why they were chosen to live as shadows of the cult. In the heat of battle, the masked assassins attack with extreme speed, attempting to overpower the exhausted warrior. Only the highest ranking elders know the secrets behind the creation of these relentless shadows. None of those shadow warriors ever managed to rise in rank or reach the position of elder in the cult, until a living legend emerges, the first master of shadows to reach the highest level of demonic arts. This legendary man is known to all as the heavenly blood demon named Baek Chiang-heil. Baek Chiang-heil shouts angrily, demanding to know who gave the order to attack him in such a cowardly way. He threatens to torture his opponent if he doesn't receive an immediate answer about who is behind that ambush. The enemy, terrified by the overwhelming power of the legendary warrior, simply shouts for the others to kill him quickly. With a look filled with fury and determination, the protagonist prepares to confront all those around him. Baek Chiang-heil advances, delivering a deadly blow, and warns that he will never die at the hands of mere pawns. Gasping for breath and covered in blood, he asks everyone to pay close attention to what is about to happen next. The hero points his sword and warns the survivors that their tragic fate is already completely sealed. He makes it clear that he will fight to protect his own life and will no longer blindly follow anyone's orders. The assassins recoil in fear and hesitate when they realize that the warrior's determination is unwavering. Baek Chiang-heil mockingly asks if they will continue to hesitate or if they will make way for him to pass. Suddenly, a powerful voice emerges, ordering the fools to immediately make way for the master's arrival. The protagonist is completely shocked to feel an overwhelming presence approaching the location. An imposing figure appears in the sky, observing the entire situation with profound contempt and arrogance. Baek Chiang-heil immediately recognizes that terrifying presence as the celestial demon himself. The supreme leader appears imposing and demands that the wounded warrior bow his head and show due respect. The warrior finds it ironic that the leader himself came personally just to deal with a single shadow. The celestial demon acknowledges that he has truly become the strongest and most dangerous assassin in the entire cult. Baek Chiang-heil laments with deep bitterness the fact that he is being discarded after a lifetime of loyalty. The cruel leader replies that a hunting dog must be eliminated as soon as the hunting season ends. With tears in his eyes, the protagonist questions whether this is really the only reason for him to be sentenced to death. The master smiles maliciously and states that the dog's real mistake was trying to surpass the power of its own owner. Baek Chiang-heil retorts, saying that it was the cult itself that demanded he become stronger and stronger to protect them. He screams in indignation at being punished justly for having perfectly fulfilled all the orders he received. The celestial demon coldly states that any animal that shows intent to attack its owner must be sacrificed. Determined to resist, the warrior declares loudly and clearly that he will no longer accept living like an obedient dog. With all his pent-up fury, he unleashes a devastating technique, creating a whirlwind of cuts around him. The supreme leader is angered by the warrior's audacity and begins to concentrate an overwhelming amount of energy in his hand. Baek Cheung-hail is hit squarely by the master's powerful attack, while the others watch from afar. Even gravely wounded and bleeding heavily, the hero uses his sword as support to keep himself standing. The villain floats imposingly and orders the rebel warrior to be completely reduced to ashes at that very moment. Gathering the rest of his strength, the protagonist refuses to accept that cruel fate without fighting to the end. He activates his most powerful technique, concentrating all his life energy into one last desperate attack. The celestial demon scoffs at your desperate attempt and prepares an even more devastating counterattack. The supreme leader channels an absurd amount of power, unleashing his most deadly technique towards the hero. A colossal explosion of energy consumes the entire battlefield, marking the end of that legendary confrontation. Baek Cheung-hail screams in pain as he is completely engulfed by that terrifying explosion of luminous energy. His body begins to be violently destroyed by the devastating impact of the blow he received from the Supreme Leader. Even while suffering unbearable pain, the protagonist vows that somehow he will manage to survive in order to have his revenge. Suddenly, a blinding light appears in the sky above a bustling, peaceful village far from that battlefield. A little girl starts screaming desperately, while an unconscious young man is being cursed at by some people around him. The boy in blue and white clothes is lying on the ground, showing no sign of life, while the girl cries beside him. She pleads, crying uncontrollably, for her brother to finally open his eyes and not leave her alone in that hostile place. The protagonist begins to regain consciousness without understanding who is shouting for him so desperately. In the blink of an eye, he finally opens his eyes, revealing a confused look as he tries to get his bearings again. He looks at the blue sky and wonders if this is hell, while the little girl continues calling for him. Observing the old buildings, he realizes that the distressed voice is indeed directed at him. The girl asks if he is all right, while the reincarnated warrior wonders who that child is. The protagonist tries to understand where he is while the little girl begs him once again to get up quickly. He sits up quickly, intrigued by the place, while someone from the enemy group mocks him, asking if he's awake. Completely disoriented, the warrior looks around, trying to understand what kind of bizarre situation is happening. Locals start gossiping, saying the boy has gone completely insane after taking just one blow. The little girl looks at him with great concern, not knowing what to do to help her beloved brother. The leader of the bullies mocks him, saying he was very worried, but the protagonist wonders if they are talking to him. The girl gathers her courage and confronts the group, angrily asking why they beat her brother like that. The bully warns her not to interfere in the adult's fight, while the warrior reminds her that his body was destroyed. The little girl shouts back, saying that the bullies were the ones who started causing trouble in the middle of the market first. Looking at his own trembling hands, the protagonist realizes with astonishment that, unbelievably, he is still alive. He touches his own shocked face as he realizes that the terrible pain of being burned alive was just an illusion. Looking at her strange clothes, he wonders what's going on while the rival leader gets angry with the girl. In a cowardly manner, the bully in red delivers a violent kick directly to the face of the defenseless little girl. He curses at the girl lying on the ground, calling her arrogant and complaining about what she just said about his group. Upon witnessing that cruel scene, the protagonist is deeply shocked, and an overwhelming rage begins to grow within him. While the bullies continue to mock him, the hero stands up with an intimidating look and draws the aggressor's attention. The leader of the bullies is confused and turns around, not understanding the defiant tone the boy used with them. The warrior stands imposingly and coldly asks where he is and who those idiots before him are. The bully clenches his fist in anger and asks if the boy has completely lost his mind or if he needs to get beaten up even more. With eyes blazing with fury, the hero thinks that those idiots must be wanting to join the dead in the afterlife. Desperate and crying a lot, the little girl grabs the hero's sleeve and begs him to stop and not start any more fights. Looking at the little girl crying, he feels compassion for a moment and mentally wonders if she is badly hurt. The girl sobs and begs him to stop saying strange things and that they can just leave quickly. The protagonist abruptly backs away and warns that he is not her brother, leaving the little girl confused and scared. He strongly insists that he is not the person she is thinking of and that it is all a big misunderstanding. The little girl cries even more, unable to understand why her beloved brother is acting in such a cold and frightening way. The bullies continue laughing at the situation, and the leader mocks them, asking who the hell he thinks he is if he's not her brother. With all his imposing presence, the hero declares that he is the feared secret shadow of the powerful celestial demonic cult. He boasts internally of being a supreme master who has managed to reach the highest level of demonic arts. The hero reveals his true identity as the legendary heavenly blood demon named Baek Chianhyo. The attackers burst into laughter and mock his pompous titles. Thinking he's finally gone mad after being beaten, he closes his eyes and calmly warns that he is not in a good mood and that if they value life, they should get out of there immediately. While they continue laughing and the girl cries, the hero remembers the mountains of bodies he has piled up in his life. The protagonist feels a profound humiliation that he hasn't felt in a long time, and besides, he needs to take action against them. He thinks about ripping one of their heads off as an example, while the idiots continue laughing and challenging him. But the warrior regains his senses and realizes that he first needs to calm down in order to better analyze the whole situation. The little girl asks what's wrong, and at that moment the hero realizes that he has reincarnated as her older brother. The bully warns that the beating won't end there, but the hero decides that his priority now is simply to find a way to escape. The hero changes his stance and orders the aggressor to immediately apologize to the girl and get out of there at once. The bully named Yukion steps forward angrily, asking if the supposed supreme master is trying to escape. He raises his hand to slap the boy again, mocking him, saying he needs more of a beating to come back to his senses. In a surprising turn of events, the hero reaches out and grabs the enemy's neck with unbelievable and terrifying force. He grabs the bully by the neck and warns him that he has no time to waste on trash while the enemy begs to be released. The warrior releases the aggressor, who begins to cough desperately and curse him angrily for the humiliation he has just suffered. With an extremely cold gaze, the protagonist watches his opponent focus his fury on him without showing any fear. Yukion goes on the attack, throwing a punch with all his might, but the hero dodges the blow incredibly easily. Taking advantage of the opponent's opening, the protagonist extends his arm with his palm open, preparing his counterattack. The warrior strikes the opponent's chest with a clean and precise palm strike, releasing a small wave of shock energy. The impact throws the bully backward, causing him to fall humiliatingly on his back in front of everyone present. The little girl watches the scene in complete silence, awestruck by her older brother's incredible change in attitude and strength. The bully's allies rush to help him, asking if he slipped and not believing he was defeated so easily. The hero looks at his own trembling hand, realizing that even such a weak blow had a great impact on his current body. He understands that he cannot remain there for long as his top priority at the moment is to rest and recover. The protagonist begins to walk away calmly, while the little girl follows him, and the enemies watch their retreat angrily. Yukion stands up furiously and shouts, demanding that the boy stop immediately, refusing to accept having been defeated in that way. The warrior looks back with angry disdain as he realizes that his persistent opponent still has the strength to continue. With his sword drawn, the bully advances, blinded by hatred, declaring that this will definitely be the day the boy dies. The girl steps in front of the hero to protect him, begging the attacker for forgiveness and asking him to leave. The bully's friends try to calm him down to avoid bigger problems, but he refuses to become the laughingstock of the local community. The hero gently places his hand on the girl's head and says that she shouldn't apologize, because they are the ones to blame. Ukion hesitates for a brief moment, completely confused by the confident posture and audacity the boy continues to display. Suddenly, the tip of his sword begins to tremble violently, revealing the unconscious fear he feels at that gaze. The protagonist advances with firm steps while the opponent tries to convince himself that it's all just a bluff. The warrior gives the bully one last chance to lower his sword and leave before the situation gets worse for him. The aggressor shouts that the hero is the one who should be on his knees begging for his life and demands that he stop playing games. He delivers a downward sword strike, stating that the boy himself was responsible for shortening his own life there. With quick and precise movements, the protagonist dodges the blade with extreme ease, without showing any sign of panic. The opponent desperately punches the air, making the warrior wonder what that fool is trying to do. He realizes that the bully is attacking with his eyes closed in panic, acting like a complete amateur with no technique. The hero takes a nimble step to the side, keeping himself completely out of reach of his opponent's chaotic attacks. He leaps lightly, performing a spectacular pirouette in the air over the opponent's clumsy sword strike. While still in the air, the protagonist strikes the bully's hand, instantly disarming him with a quick and extremely precise touch. The warrior observes his opponent from above with coldness as he finishes his acrobatic move with impeccable mastery. A trickle of blood runs down the face of the frightened bully. As he realizes he has been surgically struck, the little girl cries out anxiously for her brother, unable to keep up with the incredible speed of the rapid combat. The protagonist lands softly behind his opponent as the bully's sword flies away after the impact of the blow. The hero makes a quick move and firmly positions himself in the makeshift arena. While the opponent loses his balance, Ukion spits out blood and saliva, feeling the terrible impact the warrior's precise blow had on his throat. The attacker's sword falls heavily to the sandy ground, confirming that he has completely lost control of his weapon. To finish, the hero lands a devastating punch that sends the opponent straight to the ground for good. The attacker's companions run desperately to see if the boy is still breathing after that devastating beating. The hero calms them down by explaining that he didn't use internal energy in the attack, and therefore the unconscious bully is not in danger of death. The girl is completely speechless, unable to understand how her weak brother managed to deliver such a powerful blow. The protagonist leans down and picks up the opponent's fallen sword, gripping the leather hilt quite firmly. The bully's allies watch the scene in horror, unable to believe that the boy managed to stop the blade so masterfully. The warrior examines the weapon and thinks that such a good quality sword is a waste in the hands of a third-rate fighter. The hero prepares to leave, knowing that he has already taught that group of cowardly thugs an unforgettable lesson. The defeated opponent lies stretched out on the ground, bleeding from the nose and mouth, unable to continue fighting. The hero points his sword and coldly says that since his opponent drew his blood, he will have to pay a very high price for it. The henchmen panic and beg him to lower his weapon because the fight is over, and things are only going to get worse. The dark aura of the past resurfaces as he thinks that he will never leave alive anyone who dared to spill his blood. The hero threatens the henchmen, intimidatingly ordering them to drop their swords immediately to avoid making things worse. He questions whether it wasn't his rival who caused the whole fight and agrees to end the fight for today, since everything is decided. The protagonist sternly warns them to tell the leader that if he wants revenge, he will have to put his own life at risk. With mockery and deep contempt, the hero lightly taps the fallen opponent's face with his foot, who cries out in anger and pain. He prepares to collect his war spoils, demonstrating that the battle has truly come to an end for all of them. The hero confiscates the precious sword as payment for the injury to his leg, leaving the little girl shocked by his attitude. People at the market gossip in surprise, as they never imagined that the weak and sickly young man could be so ruthless and dangerous. One of the accomplices fears that the stories about the boy are true, which would completely ruin their secret plans. The group decides to report everything that happened to the older brother, so that they can devise a new strategy against the protagonist. They try to lift the defeated Yukian, who can only groan in anger, cursing the hero who humiliated him so much. Upon reading the sign of an inn, the protagonist realizes with astonishment that he is now living in the distant province of Hubi. He notes that he is in the heart of the Central Plains, an absurd distance that would take several days to travel on horseback. The warrior is confused to find himself in a place he has never been before and tries to understand how he ended up so far from home. The little girl asks what's wrong while he internally questions who owns that fragile body. The protagonist walks past a stall in the local market that sells various types of merchandise and hand mirrors. Intrigued by his new appearance, he decides to pick up one of the mirrors to finally see the face of his new, current body. The warrior gasps in astonishment as he looks at his own reflection and realizes that he is completely different from how he looked in the past. His intimidating face from the past has completely disappeared, giving way to youthful features with no sign of robustness. He is shocked to see that he now looks like just a pretty, extremely frail boy who must barely be 20 years old. The girl notices that her brother is trembling and asks with great concern if he is feeling unwell again. Shocked by the terrible discovery, the protagonist drops the mirror on the floor, causing it to shatter completely. He walks around disoriented, unable to accept that he will have to live in that weak body, while the little girl follows him, very worried. Suddenly a hand grabs the hero's shoulder roughly, drawing his attention and causing him to turn around in surprise. The stall owner angrily demands that he pay for the broken mirror before leaving, as he does not tolerate losses. The protagonist gives a deadly look and warns, if the man doesn't remove his hand right then and there, he will pay with his own life. The merchant is paralyzed with terror as he senses that frightening murderous intent emanating from the seemingly harmless young man. Even though he's scared, the man regains his composure and says he doesn't care if the man is a handsome boy, demanding his money back. The hero draws his sword and threatens to cut off his hands, while the vendor tries to maintain his tough guy pose despite trembling. The little girl quickly intervenes in the situation, touching the vendor's arm to prevent a tragedy from happening right there. She shows a gold coin with a friendly smile and tells the angry man that he can keep all the change. The merchant's attitude changes instantly, and he bows politely, wishing the young master would always return to his humble shop. They continue walking through the busy city streets, while the warrior tries to process everything he is experiencing. The hero suddenly stops walking and decides to ask the little girl if she really called him brother earlier. He seriously asks who he is, and the girl thinks he's completely lost his mind explaining who he obviously should be. She reveals that he is Dan Woliok, the eldest son of the leader of the Celestial Origin Sect, a name familiar to him. The warrior tries to remember, but realizes he has never heard of any important martial artist named Dan Hyaksong. The protagonist accepts that from now on he will have to live under the identity of that weak young man called Dan Woliok. Suddenly, a severe headache hits him, causing him terrible discomfort, and he puts his hand to his temple. The little girl becomes desperate upon seeing her brother's pain and anxiously asks if he is all right and if he needs any urgent help. They finally arrive at a huge traditional estate that stands out on the horizon of that beautiful mountainous region. The girl joyfully exclaims that they have finally arrived home, while the warrior observes the place thoughtfully. He focuses his eyes on the plaque on the large wooden gate that confirms that this place is the headquarters of the Celestial Origin Sect. The protagonist decides that this quiet place will be perfect for him to hide and regain his strength without raising suspicion. He finds the place smaller than he imagined, but suddenly an imposing voice echoes through the courtyard, telling him that he is very late. The warrior turns quickly towards the powerful voice, sensing that this strong presence deserves his full attention. An elderly man with white hair and golden robes appears imposingly, revealing himself as the leader Dan Hyuk-song. Upon examining the old man, the protagonist immediately realizes that he is a very dangerous, first-class martial artist. The father asks what he is staring at intently, and the hero replies somewhat reluctantly that he is finally back home. The older man focuses his eyes directly on the gleaming sword that the protagonist carries in his blood-stained hands. The leader shouts furiously, saying that he already knows about all the absurd trouble the boy has been causing in the city. The protagonist is slightly surprised to realize that news of the confrontation spread incredibly quickly. The father orders the girl to go inside, and the hero to follow him while the girl whispers, asking him to beg for forgiveness. Suddenly, a desperate female voice echoes down the hallway asking what on earth happened to the young master. A beautiful woman comes running up, and the hero realizes that the worried figure must be the mother of the body's original owner. The mother is distraught upon seeing the blood, while the father coldly orders her to step away because he needs to interrogate his son. She protests, grabbing the hero by his clothes, while the protagonist feels that the whole familiar situation is very uncomfortable. The younger brother joins the conversation, asking his mother to step away and mockingly saying that the boy must have gone completely mad. The hero recognizes the boy as the leader's second son and notes that he truly has the presence of a real warrior. Seeing his brother's mockery, the hero mentally decides that he will need to teach him a lesson soon to set things right. Once inside the room, the father sternly informs the boy that he has gotten into a fight with an important disciple of the White Dragon Sect. The leader questions the seriousness of the situation, while the hero defends himself by stating that it was the enemy who started the attack. He calmly explains that the rivals invaded their territory and that things only got out of control because the other attacked him. The father's eyes widen in extreme anger, and he asks in shock if the boy really dared to wield a sword against his rival. The hero recalls that his opponent assaulted his defenseless little sister, and so he decided to cut off his leg as just punishment. He places the confiscated sword on the table to prove his point, demonstrating that he is not making up any story. The boy shows the injury on his own leg, causing the father's fury to instantly shift towards his rivals. The warrior senses his father's concern and deduces that the rival sect must be infinitely stronger than his own family. He thinks it's positive to have heard the details of the conversation, because he now understands the political landscape of his new reality much better. The hero reassures his father, saying that he made the aggressor pay for his mistakes, and the old man is astonished to hear about the rival's punishment. The protagonist threatens to kill the enemy if his father doesn't believe him, causing the old man to become angry and hastily summon a servant. The hero decides to hold back because he knows he will need the support of that old leader if he wants to survive and thrive in that body. An extremely strong man rushes into the meeting room, promptly answering the urgent call of his supreme leader. The servant named Makta bows loyally and says that he is fully prepared to carry out any order given by his master. The protagonist observes the exaggerated posture of that enormous lackey and mentally wonders what kind of bizarre character he is. Without warning, The servant lovingly picks up the hero and shouts desperately that he has already called for the best doctor there. Being carried like that, the hero wonders, confused, what kind of life the previous owner of that body used to lead there. Night falls over the sect's vast property, as the full moon illuminates the place in a tranquil and silent way. The doctor examines the hero's wound and concludes that, luckily, the main energy channels did not suffer any serious damage. He prescribes complete rest for the patient and politely bids him farewell, silently leaving the young master's room. The enormous servant Macte turns around crying profusely and calls out to the young master in an extremely dramatic and noisy manner. He throws himself to the ground, hugging the hero's leg and crying with relief, leaving the protagonist extremely irritated by the commotion. Impatient with all that drama, the warrior kicks the servant away, causing the man to collapse face first onto the ground. The lackey continues whining and says his heart was in his throat when he learned that the young master fought against those thugs. The hero coldly asks the reason for so much concern, questioning whether the servant would be fired if he were truly injured. Macte cries even more, accusing the boy of being very insensitive and complaining that he has never acted so coldly in the past. The hero realizes the mistake and notes, with surprise, that the man truly cares deeply about his master's well-being. Claiming a headache, the hero asks the servant to leave the room for a moment, and the man asks worriedly if the pain is severe. With an authoritative look, the hero orders that from now on the lackey must only obey his orders, without ever questioning him again. The servant bows politely, accepting the young master's order, without suspecting a thing about what is happening. As he leaves, the lackey laments, thinking that the boy is acting that strangely because he is in shock after the recent battle. He walks thoughtfully and wonders how the young master managed to deliver a kick with such physical impact earlier. The hero looks at himself naked in the mirror and laments, seeing the deplorable and weak physical state of the eldest son of a large sect. He concludes that it will be impossible to take revenge on his former cult in that deplorable state, and without any adequate muscle mass. Despite this, the warrior rejoices to be alive and free from the rigid control of his former demonic cult masters. Sitting in the lotus position, he decides to focus his willpower and time on training and rebuilding his vital energy. His eyes gleam intensely as he begins to focus his inner strength to begin his training. However, the training is interrupted by a severe leg cramp, causing the hero to curse the weakness of that cursed body. That same night, under a red sky, the protagonist ends up being haunted by violent memories of his terrible past. In his dreams, he sees himself again as the relentless warrior fighting alone on a dark night surrounded by smoke and dust. He relives the moments when he had to extend his bloodied hands to desperately fight for his survival. Enemies from the past cursed him, shouting that he was nothing more than a despicable monster and an obedient dog of his former master. The memories of bloody battles and faces filled with hatred continue to deeply torment the weary mind of the protagonist. He remembers when he was surrounded by hordes of enraged enemies who called him a cruel and bloodthirsty murderer. His fallen opponents vowed that they would be waiting for him in hell to make him pay for all his terrible atrocities. They swore to give the warrior a slow and painful death, exactly like the one he had inflicted on each of them. The hero fought fiercely, slicing skulls and monsters without showing any pity or hesitation in the face of imminent danger. He shouted furiously, questioning whether his opponents were unaware of the absolute law, that only the strong have the right to rule. The warrior emphasized that in the demonic cult, the word of the strong was law and that everyone should swear absolute loyalty or die. Despite his absurd strength, the hero constantly found himself covered in blood and surrounded by endless darkness in his battles. Terrifying skeletons and ghouls bit and tore him apart, trying to drag him into the depths of that endless nightmare. The protagonist found himself suffocating and unable to escape as dozens of skeletal hands forcefully pulled him down. The nightmare monsters decreed that the time had finally come for their terrible and well-deserved death in that dark place. The hero let out a deafening scream of agony as the undead's sharp claws violently scratched his face. Declaring that he would not accept dying that way, Dan Wolyak wakes up with a start in bed, completely terrified. Gasping for breath and sweating profusely, he realizes that this terrible nightmare used to wake him up every day and confirms that his mind is still bakes. Suddenly, loud banging noises on the door begin to echo through the courtyard, followed by furious shouts ordering him to come out. The invaders continue pounding on the Sect's main wooden gate, shouting arrogantly for it to be opened immediately. They threaten to break down the gate by force if their demands are not met, while the servant Macte sweeps the courtyard and listens to the commotion. The enormous lackey is confused, not understanding the reason for so much noise and commotion at the entrance of the Sect so early in the morning. He decides to walk to the main entrance and begins to remove the heavy wooden latch to open the gate at once. Upon opening a crack in the gate, the footman attempts to remain polite and politely asks who they are and what they want there. A blond man in red robes arrogantly replies, announcing that he is Jum Salman of the powerful White Dragon Sect. Upon hearing the name of the dreaded rival sect, the servant Macte falls into complete despair and his eyes widen, trembling with panic. Jum Salman bursts into the courtyard with his men, arrogantly shouting for the hero and demanding that he appear there immediately. The intruder continues shouting in the middle of the courtyard, questioning whether the hero's family dares to ignore the will of the White Dragon. He warns that he will not leave without collecting the debt from the boy, while the protagonist listens calmly from inside his room. The hero's father bursts into the courtyard furious, reprimanding the young intruder and shouting that he had already warned that his son was recovering. Listening to the commotion behind the door, the protagonist gives an ironic smile upon noticing that the rivals have finally decided to show up. Showing no respect, the invading leader shouts back, demanding that they hand over the hero to him once and for all. The father tries to appease the situation by saying it was just a fight between young people, but the rival threatens to declare war on their sect. The old leader retorts, saying that it was the rival's men who assaulted his young daughter and attacked his hair first. The blonde intruder gives a mocking smile and repeats that if they don't want things to get worse, they should hand the boy over soon. A calm voice emerges from the top of the stairs, saying that they will not do that under any circumstances, drawing the attention of everyone in the courtyard. The father and the footmen were completely shocked to see the boy standing in the courtyard, and the old man shouted, asking what he was doing there. The protagonist appears impeccably dressed, wearing clean clothes, and with an extremely firm posture in the face of his worst enemies. Jim Salman stares at him with deep contempt, accusing the hero of using cowardly tricks to defeat his younger brother. The hero smiles sarcastically and mocks, saying that the invaders must be the henchmen of that coward who faked his death. One of the warriors accompanying the blond man loses control upon hearing the mockery and shouts furiously, asking if the hero wants to die. The henchman advances furiously, drawing his sword to attack the audacious young man who dares to mock their powerful sect there. Jum Salman angrily draws his gleaming blade and declares loudly that he will deliver a merciless judgment against the hero. He delivers a swift sword strike towards the protagonist, slicing through the air with extreme violence and deadly precision. However, the blonde invader's eyes widen in shock as he realizes that his deadly attack was successfully blocked in time. The hero's father appears in front of his son wielding his sword with blue energy and sternly warns the rivals to retreat. The blonde invader points his sword and shouts that he is only punishing whoever cowardly attacked his brother, questioning the old leader. The father warns that if they don't put away their swords, he won't hesitate to fight, while the rival asks if they want to be enemies. The hero observes everything in silence and thinks is the classic tactic of the strong humiliating smaller sects out of pure whim. He steps forward, placing his hand on his father's shoulder, and asks to resolve the situation alone without his interference. The boy says it's all a misunderstanding and that he'll sort it out, while his father wonders what's gotten into him. The blonde member of the rival sect turns around, intrigued by the hero's words, and mockingly asks if he really called it a misunderstanding. The hero stares at him with extreme coldness and calmly confirms that things happened in a completely different way. Irritated, the aggressor asks if the boy dares to speak to him as an equal and promises that he will no longer make his life easy. The blonde man scoffs, saying that the hero's sect doesn't seem to teach good manners and respect to older martial warriors. The hero retorts that his rival's actions demonstrate the low level of his sect and asks what is wrong with his manners. The rival leader becomes enraged, calling the boy arrogant and asking if he thinks defeating a lackey with a surprise attack is a joke. The protagonist raises his head in irritation upon hearing the false accusation that he won the fight using a cowardly attack. He raises his hand imposingly and defiantly asks if his rival really called the victory a surprise attack. The hero tears a piece of his clothing, revealing the dried blood from the cut on his leg to prove the attacker's lie. He accuses his opponent of drawing his sword against someone unarmed and says that talking about a surprise attack only makes him laugh. The defeated bully tries to defend himself by shouting that the hero hit his vital points and that he only lost because of tricks. The protagonist retorts by asking if the coward doesn't remember that he started the trouble by assaulting a defenseless little girl. He adds that they weren't the only ones there and suggests that everyone listened to the testimonies of witnesses from the local market. The attacker's henchmen swallow hard and begin to sweat as they realize that their truth is about to be exposed. Joom Saman gives a cynical smile and states that witnesses can be easily fabricated and bribed to lie at trial. The hero calmly walks towards his rivals and asks how they intend to prove the innocence of their cowardly companion. The intruder stares at him intimidatingly and questions whether the hair truly wants concrete proof of their strength there. The blonde leader proposes with a wicked smile that they settle that dispute once and for all through an official sword duel. The boy's father and servant Mactae are completely shocked by the absurd duel challenge made by the rival warrior. The intruder suggests a duel with wooden swords to prove whether the protagonist is truly skilled at fighting honestly. With a sly, mischievous smile, the protagonist accepts the challenge with open arms, showing no hesitation. The old father despairs at his heir's unprecedented and reckless behavior, but the young man calmly asks him not to worry. The blonde leader says the outcome will determine who is right and warns that if the hero loses, he will have to pay an extremely high price. He imposes harsh conditions, demanding that the boy's defeat be made public and that all members of his sect be banished from there. The rival concludes that this will force the hero's sect to abandon all trade in that lucrative region. Mactae whispers anxiously to the leader, confirming that the rivals are plotting a ruse just to drive them out of that territory. The hero finds disgusting the hypocritical way in which the supposedly righteous sects act, while his rival questions him with great irritation. He faces his blonde opponent and asks what will happen if the feared rival sect is defeated in that official duo. The rival mockingly asks if he wants land from his sect and says that they don't need anything like that to prove their strength. The protagonist demands that they officially admit guilt for the fight and forbid their disciples from setting foot on their land. The hero's audacious demands leave both the aggressors and his own father in a complete state of shock and silence. The rival angrily questions whether the boy really thinks that silly duel warrants severe punishments for the entire enemy sect. The hero coldly retorts, saying that they should send someone to the fight who is worthy of the importance of that battle. The rival leader's eyes widen in extreme surprise and fury at the arrogant and defiant tone used by the protagonist. The hero walks slowly and says that the ideal opponent must be worthy of facing the rightful heir of the celestial origin sect. He gives a provocative smile and suggests that perhaps a first-class disciple from the rival sect would be the appropriate opponent. Jum Salman becomes enraged when he realizes that the weak boy is openly mocking his abilities and reputation. The father panics completely, thinking that his heir has completely lost his mind by making such dangerous demands. The hero opens his arms and declares that if he loses, he will personally surrender as a hostage to pay for what happened yesterday. The rival smiles greedily, calculating the $1 million ransom he can demand from the elderly father for the freedom of his kidnapped son. The blond man mentally concludes that all that confident posture of the boy is nothing more than a bluff from a boy known for being weak. He accepts all the proposed conditions and proudly announces that he will be the representative of the rival sect in that important duel. The intruder points to himself and arrogantly declares that he will fight in the name of his sect, asking if there are any objections. The hero immediately accepts, finding the choice excellent, while the other henchmen are astonished by their leader's decision to fight. The defeated opponent from yesterday watches the scene with concern and cold sweat, fearing for the fate of his leader in that confrontation. The aggressor points his finger, declaring that the duel is scheduled for 15 days from now, and that everyone there will serve as a witness. The invader accepts that they choose the location and orders his men to follow him, arrogantly withdrawing from the property. Inside the meeting room, the hero's father shouts furiously, calling the boy a fool for accepting such a risky challenge. The old man rages, asking the reason for such a reckless attitude, and the hero replies that it was the best way out of the situation. The old man rages, asking if his son acted impulsively to escape danger without thinking about the serious consequences. The father laments, saying he thought the heir was wise, and the protagonist wonders if he's calling him an idiot. With a wry smile, the hero tells him not to worry and assures him that he is no longer the same weak young man from the past. The leader shouts indignantly, asking if the heir really thinks he would accept seeing him sacrifice himself to calm the fight. Upon realizing that his father cares about his safety, the hero is surprised by the display of genuine paternal affection. He clenches his fist tightly and warns that he does not intend to sacrifice himself because he will emerge as the absolute victor in that imminent duel. The father counters his son's optimism by reminding him that his opponent, Jum Salman, is a first-class master recognized by all. The old leader warns that even using wooden swords the boy will have no chance. But the hero says they will only know by fighting. The father slams his fist on the table, irritated by his stubbornness, and asks if he is not aware of the seriousness of his own weakness. He recalls that the heir was born with his yin energy channels completely blocked, resulting in minimal physical strength. The protagonist is intrigued by the revelation and recognizes the name of that rare and debilitating physical condition in his mind. The father goes on to say that, because of this physical problem, his son's current strength is equivalent to that of an average woman. The leader explains that the boy was unable to learn proper energy techniques for fear of further shortening his lifespan. The hero falls to his knees in sorrow as he realizes that this rare physical disability is the real reason for his extreme body weakness. The old man wonders about his reaction while explaining that with such a frail body, it would be suicide to face the rival master. The panting hero on the ground finally understands why he tires so quickly with any slightly strenuous physical movement. He realizes he needs a very powerful yang energy cultivation technique to unblock the energy blockage in his body. The hero concludes that the only salvation for that frail body is a forbidden cultivation technique hidden within his ancient cult. He stands up resolutely and thinks that although he wanted to avoid using that demonic art, he now has no other choice. As the protagonist mentally prepares for the secret training, he repeats to himself that he can no longer back down. The hero faces his father firmly and declares that as the rightful heir and martial artist, he will proceed with the scheduled duel. The father shouts furiously, saying that he will not allow his heir to walk towards his own death with his eyes open without doing anything. The hero darkly suggests that his father give him some men so that he can eliminate his opponent at night in the shadows. The cult leader's eyes widen, and he is completely speechless upon hearing that macabre and cold proposal coming from his own son. He ignores the suggestion and says that simply sending a letter of apology and a bribe in silver will resolve the dispute with the rivals. The hero rejects the idea in his thoughts, knowing that apologizing would make their sect look weak and lead to its downfall. He thinks with irritation that, if that sect is destroyed, it will be extremely difficult to make plans for his own future. The protagonist then decides to make a single proposal to his father, who listens with intrigue and wants to know what the request is about. The hero asks for only one opportunity to prove his true strength and says that if he wins, his father must allow the duel. The old leader angrily asks how he intends to prove his worth and questions whether the heir wants to cross swords with him. However, before the father could continue scolding, loud noises began to echo from outside, drawing his attention. The hero decides to leave, and the father watches the young man go away thoughtfully while Macte approaches with a worried look. The servant says that, according to young Aaron, the heir has been acting strangely since he received that blow to the head yesterday. The old leader becomes enraged, blaming the enemy sect for leaving his beloved son in that disturbed mental state. Meanwhile, silence and tranquility take over the wooden corridors of the grand mansion during that calm night. In his room, the hero concentrates to initiate the legendary celestial fire energy cultivation technique to strengthen himself. This extremely secret technique belonged to a legendary and very powerful martial king who disappeared 200 years ago. The energy cultivation method was one of the most valuable treasures of the protagonist's ancient blood cult from 1,000 years ago. The hero knows that the method is perfect for blocked energy channels and feels lucky to have mastered an art of this level. Now he is the only person alive in all of the Central Plains to have mastered that legendary and overwhelming energy technique. Suddenly, violent knocks on the door interrupt the boy's training, followed by the voice of his second son. Wanting to come in immediately, the hero opens his eyes sharply and asks with great irritation what his younger brother wants at this hour. The bedroom door is abruptly opened by the younger brother, who bluntly announces that he's entering anyway. The protagonist stares coldly at him and questions what motivated such an inopportune visit in the middle of the dark night. The younger brother enters seriously and announces that their father has ordered the two of them to have a friendly sword duel in 10 days. The hero smiles calmly and reveals without hesitation that it was actually he who made that request to their father. The younger boy laughs in surprise upon learning that the weak heir has challenged him, and mockingly asks what his problem is. He approaches arrogantly and questions whether the hero really thinks he has any chance of defeating him in combat. The brother shouts angrily, asking if the heir proposed the fight merely to mark territory and protect his title as leader. The protagonist merely lets out a sarcastic, wry smile as he realizes how much his younger brother covets his position as heir. The younger brother vents, saying he was angry about the situation, but tried his best not to hate the protagonist. The boy laments his own fate and reveals that this friendly duel only makes him feel even more unhappy The hero realizes in his thoughts that his younger brother is resentful for having the ability, but not being able to inherit the leadership position. The protagonist sincerely apologizes for causing that huge misunderstanding, and his younger brother looks at him in surprise. He explains that he only wanted to test his current strength before the big duel with his rivals, and admits that he failed by not listening to him. Hearing Dan Wolyek's kind and understanding words, the younger brother is deeply moved and speechless. The hero jokes that his brother underestimated him by thinking he had petty intentions with the proposed duel. He adds, seriously, that his brother has no idea of all the effort he is making to overcome the blockage in his body. The younger brother lowers his head in shame, admitting that he thought he had abandoned martial arts to study. The hero clenches his fist and vows to prove his worth in the duel, promising to relinquish his position if defeated by his brother. The younger boy's eyes widen in extreme surprise, and he asks, shocked, if his brother is really serious. The youngest son considers that their father will certainly oppose this decision, but the protagonist asks him not to worry. The hero vows that if he loses the duel, he himself will ask his father to pass the title of rightful heir to his brother. He demands only that his brother fight with all his might and use 100% of his martial skills in combat. The youngest son enthusiastically accepts the challenge, seeing it as a fair chance to finally prove his worth to the entire family sect. The sun finally rises on the horizon, marking the beginning of a new morning full of light over the rooftops of the large estate. Fully dressed and with a suitcase on his back, the protagonist begins to walk through the stone courtyard of the family mansion. The enormous servant Makte intercepts him midway, asking worriedly where he intends to go so early in the day. The hero replies curtly that he will be gone for 5 days and orders the lackey to simply repeat this to anyone who asks about him. The lackey is startled by the sudden 5-day trip and tremulously asks if the hare doesn't plan to disappear forever. The protagonist glares at him angrily, asking if he really looks like the kind of person who would cowardly run away from a duel. The servant smiles foolishly and mockingly, ironically agreeing that the hare did indeed use to run away in the past. The warrior completely loses patience with the lackey's mockery and delivers a violent punch to the cheeky man's face. Makte falls to the ground with a bloody nose, but wishes the master a good trip, who continues on his way without looking back. The scene changes to a beautiful and grand palace surrounded by verdant mountains and lakes under the glow of the afternoon sun. Quick footsteps echo through the luxurious corridors of the place as one of the servants runs desperately to speak with his master. The servant informs the fat master, who is resting on a divan, that there is a very mysterious visitor at the gate looking for him. The rich man yawns lazily and complains, saying that he thought he had no appointments scheduled for that day. The lackey whispers in the fat boss's ear, telling him that the visitor looks like a handsome and elegant young man. The fat merchant gets angry and orders some guards to beat up the cheeky intruder and throw him out immediately. The servant explains, terrified, that the boy claims to be a traveler from beyond Qinghai, who has come to retrieve a very valuable item. Upon hearing about the traveler from Qinghai, the fat merchant's expression changes instantly, and he desperately orders that he be brought inside. The sliding door of a luxurious room opens, revealing an extremely refined environment prepared to receive the visitor. The hero is received with full honors and begins to savor a cup of hot tea served personally to him. Sitting across from the frightened merchant, the protagonist compliments the pleasant aroma of the tea that was offered to him. The fat man tries to hide his panic and gives a forced smile, saying that he is immensely happy that the drink pleases his palate. The warrior begins the conversation with a calm smile and asks if the merchant has been facing difficulties with his business. The luxurious property gleams in the golden sunlight as a tense atmosphere begins to take hold of that secret meeting. The hero repeats the praise about the quality of the tea, demonstrating a calmness that makes the merchant even more nervous. The fat merchant repeats that he feels extremely relieved to know that the visitor liked the taste of the drink. The protagonist apologizes for the sudden visit without sending a prior letter explaining that the situation was urgent. The merchant assures him that there is no problem whatsoever, and the hero takes the opportunity to ask again about the progress of his business. The fat man replies, sweating profusely, that thanks to the cult's continued support, his business is running perfectly. The protagonist takes another sip of his tea and says in a friendly manner that he feels very happy to know that everything is fine. The merchant swallows hard and watches the visitor calmly drink his tea. Fearing the real reason for this surprise visit, he wonders to himself why the warrior appeared without warning and begs him to tell him what he wants from there. The merchant is terrified to learn that the terrifying celestial demonic cult is the only faction one should never trifle with. A tense silence fills the luxurious meeting room as the portly trader tries to muster the courage to ask a question. The fat merchant finally swallows his saliva and very cautiously asks what the real reason for today's visit is. The hero places the cup on the table and apologizes, saying he was so distracted by the aroma of the tea that he forgot to mention it. The merchant is silently irritated to see that the boy remained quiet despite that threatening pose before saying he forgot. He disguises his anger with a forced laugh and politely asks the boy to reveal what important matter brought him there. The hero explains that he did not come for official cult business, but rather to deliver an urgent request coming directly from above. The rich man swallows hard and listens with considerable concern, noticing that this is a serious demand coming from the cult. The protagonist demands rare ginseng elixirs and 1,000 gold coins directly, leaving the fat merchant in a panic. The fat man curses mentally, unable to believe the audacity of that boy who appeared out of nowhere demanding such an absurd amount of money from him. He suspects that the handsome young man may not actually belong to the demonic cult, since he himself admitted that the visit is not official. The merchant calculates that the gold is equivalent to the budget of a cult, but fears losing the ginseng and jeopardizing his monthly profit. The hero silently observes the fat man and notices that he is making complex calculations in his mind in an attempt to profit. The protagonist smiles slightly and calmly points out that he forgot to mention one more crucial detail of the request. With a calm movement, he slides a sealed letter across the table, completely changing the atmosphere of that meeting. Upon seeing the document, the fat man panics completely and kneels down, desperately begging for his life to be spared. The hero tells him not to be afraid, because he didn't come to kill him, and explains that the letter is just a message sent by his superiors. The fat merchant stares at the trembling paper in terror, unable to hide the cold sweat that runs down his pale face. He opens the letter, and his eyes widen in complete shock as he reads the message and recognizes the official seal on the document. The hero knows that his handwriting is identical to that of the scribes of the cult, and that the fat man will recognize the legitimacy of that order. The paper rests on the luxurious wooden table, unquestionably confirming the young man's authority in the eyes of the merchant. Completely terrified, the fat man suggests preparing the required gold and a ginseng that is less than 500 years old, asking if it is acceptable. The protagonist calmly picks up the letter and comments disdainfully that the message seems to have lost its value for the merchant. With an extremely grim look, the hero approaches and says that the rich man needs to listen to him very carefully now. He firmly states that he did not come there to negotiate, and that he will explain the seriousness of the entire situation in more detail. The merchant begins to sweat with fear as he realizes that the hero is about to reveal details about the leader that he shouldn't know. The hero begins to talk about the young leader, but the fat man interrupts, terrified, saying that he already understands and doesn't want to hear anything more. The rich man collapses to his knees before the protagonist, submitting completely to the overwhelming authority of that mysterious young man. He bows to the ground and begs for the warrior's forgiveness, claiming that he only suffered a terrible moment of lapse in judgment. The fat man hands over a bag full of gold and the legendary 1,000-year-old ginseng that he had painstakingly saved throughout his life. The hero admires the extremely high-quality ginseng that shines before him, recognizing that this elixir is extremely powerful. With a satisfied look, the protagonist concludes in his thoughts that this valuable reward will be more than enough for him. The merchant remains bent over on the ground, desperately pleading with the hero to calm his rage and do nothing against him. The protagonist leaves, carrying his treasures, while the merchant continues bowing in the courtyard with utmost respect. The hero smiles slightly, very pleased with himself, noticing that that quick trip has turned into a very lucrative business. The journey continues through beautiful mountainous landscapes with giant waterfalls and dense forests as the boy continues his travels. The hero arrives at a small, isolated wooden inn located in the middle of the forest near the base of the mountains. The inn's inner courtyard is rustic and welcoming, featuring a few tables set up to receive travelers. The elderly and humble owners of the place prepare hot and tasty steamed baozi dishes for customers. The hero enters the inn, pushing aside the rustic fabric curtain at the entrance to shelter himself from the cold of that gray afternoon. The attendant greets him in a friendly manner, welcoming the new customer, who has just arrived at the establishment. The boy asks if he wants a room, and the hero sits at the table asking what the specialties of that kitchen are. The waiter assures that all the dishes made there are wonderful, and a mysterious customer observes the young man from afar in the room. The hero joyfully asks for all the greasy and tasty dishes to be brought, without worrying about the price at any point. The waiter asks if anyone else is coming, but the hero says he will eat alone and will pay handsomely for the entire feast served. In the kitchen, the elderly cook begins preparing the dishes, stirring his wok over high heat to ensure the special order is perfect. The protagonist feels his body tired and laments that his new physical form is so weak that it leaves him exhausted so easily. He notes that he trained his energy circulation for 3 days in a row, but has not yet obtained any significant improvement there. However, the hero knows that this terrible physical weakness will no longer be a problem for him in that location from now on. His eyes gleam as he reaches into the suitcase, knowing that the powerful 1,000-year-old ginseng he has obtained will resolve the blockage. The young kitchen helper returns, carrying the trays of food, and the mysterious customer continues to keep an eye on the protagonist. The employee serves an incredible variety of delicious hot and cooked dishes on the young master's wooden table. With his mouth watering, the protagonist smiles foolishly as he realizes that this is the most lavish and luxurious meal of his entire life. The warrior picks up the wooden chopsticks and prepares to savor the most succulent piece of pork from that meal. The hero savors the delicious food and thinks that the only positive aspect of being in that weak body is being able to eat whatever he wants. The young employee asks if the food is good, and the boy praises the dishes, saying he has never tasted such delicious food. Suddenly, one of the inn's customers angrily slams his fist on the table and begins shouting furiously, complaining about the quality of the food. The man complains that the bread rolls are hard and dry, accusing the owners of serving garbage to the customers. Blind with rage, the hooligan pulls out his blade and cuts one of the bread rolls, throwing it violently at the young attendant. The employee is paralyzed with terror as he watches the food fly at high speed directly towards his face. The protagonist stops eating immediately and stares at the scene with great irritation and disdain for the man's attitude. The young attendant gathers his courage and shouts at the man, telling him that even though he is a customer, he has no right to act like that. The aggressor violently grabs the attendant by the collar, threatening to hit him for daring to answer back. Suddenly, a filled bun flies through the air and hits the bully squarely in the face, making a loud, cracking sound. The crushed food falls onto the wooden floor of the inn, confirming that the protagonist's throw was accurate and precise. The bully yells furiously, wanting to know who did that, while the hero mockingly comments that he doesn't want the food. The man bends down and picks up the crushed food from the floor with fingers trembling with anger at the humiliation he suffered. He turns, his gaze filled with hatred, towards the hero and angrily asks if he was the one who threw it. The protagonist calmly stands up and orders the aggressor to pick up the food from the floor and eat it immediately without complaining. The crushed food remains fallen on the wood, serving as a direct provocation against the proud and out of control bully. The man wipes his face with his hand, trembling with hatred, and shouts, asking who the bastard was who dared to make that provocation. The hero responds sharply that he was the one who shot and says, he did it just to make the bully eat his fill. The bully asks if he's confessing to the act, and the protagonist scoffs, asking who else would be there besides himself. He coldly adds that he only returned the food to its rightful owner and orders the man to finish eating quickly. The aggressor draws his sword, calling the boy arrogant and promising to teach him a painful lesson to make him learn respect. He advances angrily, vowing to show the boy just how cruel and dangerous the real world can be for weak people like him. The hero observes him analytically and realizes in his thoughts that the opponent is nothing more than an ordinary bandit without inner energy. The protagonist warns that he doesn't like to repeat himself and gives one last stern warning to the aggressor to take the food and eat it all. In this tense moment, the young innkeeper shouts desperately, trying to prevent a tragedy from occurring there. The attendant begs the man to calm down and return to his seat, promising that the inn will compensate for all the trouble. The bully gets angry at the interruption and assaults the employee with a violent punch to the face, sending him straight to the ground. The young lackey collapses wounded on the wood, while the hero watches this cowardly act with an increasingly serious and cold gaze. Upon witnessing that unnecessary aggression against the attendant, the protagonist decides that he will not let the man get away with it. The aggressor turns to the hero again and vows to make him pay dearly for all that humiliation in front of others. The bully delivers a violent sword slash against the protagonist, who remains standing in the same place without showing any reaction. With an extremely agile movement, the hero tilts his body to the side and dodges the sharp blade with complete ease. Incredulous at the perfect dodge, the aggressor curses the boy and prepares to launch another desperate attack. The hero focuses his blue eyes on the wooden chopsticks on the dining table, planning his next move against the attacker. With extreme speed, he grabs one of the wooden chopsticks from the table, moving his hand in an impressive and precise reflex. The hero uses the wooden chopstick with surgical precision to pierce the attacker's hand, causing the man to scream in extreme pain. The attacker screams in deep agony, while the protagonist maintains his stern expression after neutralizing the opponent's weapon. Holding his wounded and bloody hand, the bully drops his sword to the ground as he recoils in fear at the boy's strength. The elderly owners of the guest house watch the scene in terror, not knowing what to do in the face of that sudden violence. The bully draws his sword with his other hand and shouts, blinded by hatred, that he will kill the boy no matter what for that insult. He advances with his blade raised, attempting to deliver one last blow, but the protagonist simply waits for him with complete serenity. The hero easily dodges the desperate attack and lands an extremely powerful straight punch to his rival's face. The impact causes the assailant to spit blood and saliva as his body is thrown backward with extreme physical violence. The man cries out in pain as he is struck with such force by the young man he believed to be just a harmless boy. The bully's body collapses backward onto the wooden floor of the inn, bleeding heavily from the nose after the impact of the knee strike. The groaning aggressor says the boy will pay dearly and that he doesn't know who he is, but the hero observes him from above with total indifference. The protagonist picks up the opponent's fallen sword from the ground and coldly warns that he doesn't care at all who he is. He points the blade at the neck of his fallen rival and accuses him of ruining the first decent meal of his entire life right there. With a terrifying look, the hero orders the attacker one last time to pick up the food from the floor and eat it all if he wants to live. Panicked by the boy's deadly threat, the assailant desperately gets up and runs out of the inn to save his life. The bully stops running in the distance and turns around, his face bruised and furious at the humiliation he suffered. He spits the blood on the ground and wipes his mouth, cursing the absurd strength shown by the protagonist. The aggressor desperately swears revenge, promising to make the boy pay for breaking his pride. Inside the inn, the hero calmly sits back down and asks the attendant if that kind of confusion always happens. The young lackey explains that the situation has worsened considerably in recent days, which is why the place was without customers. He says sales plummeted after a rival inn opened nearby and fears they may have to close their doors. The warrior listens to the thoughtful employee's outburst while analyzing the information about the place's financial situation. The employee hands over the meal bill, and the protagonist places a gleaming gold coin on the rustic wooden table. The lackey is speechless upon seeing so much gold and desperately warns that they have no smaller coins to give the proper change. The hero announces that he doesn't need change because he has decided to rent the entire inn exclusively for the next 4 days. He orders that they prepare only 2 elaborate meals a day and that they keep his room impeccably clean at all times. The hero adds that he doesn't want any other guests accepted on the premises as he prefers total silence to train in peace. The clerk swallows hard, impressed, when he realizes that that single gold coin is equivalent to an entire month's revenue. The protagonist focuses his sharp blue eyes on the lackey and authoritatively asks if there is a problem with his conditions. The employee and the elderly cook bow hurriedly, assuring that there is no problem whatsoever, and accept the gold with joy. The old cook is immensely grateful for the generosity and says it is an honor to receive such an important client at the inn. The lackey guides the hero to the upper floor, showing him the accommodations, while the old cook bites into the gold to test it. The hero surveys the room and notices that the window offers excellent visibility and that the location at the end of the corridor serves as an escape route. Woliak announces that he will take the room, and the employee readily agrees, bowing before leaving. However, before the lackey closes the door, the protagonist calls him again, drawing the attention of the frightened young man. The hero menacingly orders that no one approach the room during the night, no matter what noises they hear. The employee agrees, terrified, and the protagonist slams the wooden door shut, beginning his voluntary isolation. The boy outside swallows hard and steps back, intrigued by the intimidating gaze and curt commands of the new guest. Night falls quickly over the forest, and the full moon shines in the sky, illuminating the peaceful, solitary inn. Woliak observes the 1,000-year-old ginseng in his room and is impressed by the absurd amount of vital energy emanating from it. He knows that for an ordinary human that root would be a deadly poison, but that his special training will convert the toxins into power. With determination, he takes the first bite of the rare elixir knowing that he will need a lot of strength to absorb so much energy. Woliok chews the root, feeling an intense and powerful heat rise like a burning flame directly from the bottom of his abdomen. He positions himself in the center of the bed and begins the meditation process, focusing on absorbing the strong yang energy of the rare plant. Using his forbidden martial arts technique, the protagonist channels the power of fire to purify the blocked channels in his body. The internal energy flow that was previously non-existent begins to move quickly and purely through all of your meridians. The yang energy of the root begins to widen the blocked channels of your body, waging a fierce internal battle against the cold yin. The hero suffers excruciating pain while bleeding from his nose and mouth, but he resists in order to expel all the impurities from his body. He visualizes that he will recover his martial arts techniques from the past, and that he will use that strong foundation to overcome his old rivals. Woliok spits out the accumulated impure blood and vows that he will return strong as a wolf to destroy the damned leader who betrayed him. A scream of fury and pain echoes from inside the room, causing the wooden walls of the inn to tremble under the impact of the energy. The sun finally rises, announcing the dawn of a new day. While an air of mystery continues to hang over the inn, the employee and his bosses talk worriedly downstairs, fearing something bad might have happened to the mysterious guest. The boy with the headband looks up tensely, hoping the warrior is all right and that nothing serious has happened to him. Suddenly, firm footsteps begin to echo on the wooden staircase, and the employee turns around hurriedly, noticing the guest's arrival. The wooden planks creak under the protagonist's feet as he descends the stairs with a noticeably more imposing physical presence. The employee greets him in shock upon seeing that the boy looks much healthier and more robust than the previous afternoon. He timidly asks if the boy had a comfortable night as the hero approaches with a calm and refreshed expression. The protagonist smiles slightly, thanking them for their hospitality, and says he is very hungry, ordering them to bring food immediately. He stops at the bottom of the stairs, displaying a heroic and confident posture that deeply frightens the humble attendant at the location. The hero emphasizes that he slept incredibly well and displays a sharp look that demonstrates the absolute success of his secret training. The lackey swallows hard and wonders in horror if the boy's physique has always been as imposing and strong as it appears now. Woliok repeats in a friendly but authoritative manner that he is hungry and asks for a hearty meal to be prepared as soon as possible. The lackey announces that breakfast is already being prepared and asks if there is any specific dish the master wishes to eat. The protagonist puts his hand to his chin thoughtfully and says that the roast pork he ate yesterday would be an excellent dish option. The employee serves a dish, saying it's just an appetizer and that the main course will be brought soon. Woliok tells him to hurry up with the rest of the food because he's starving and his mouth is watering. Suddenly, a loud shout from outside the inn tells everyone to get out of there immediately. The young employee goes to the entrance, confused, and tries to welcome the unexpected new customers, but he comes face to face with heavily armed men with unfriendly faces right at the door of the establishment. The boy recoils in fear upon seeing the dangerous weapons those brutish men are carrying. Guangte swallows hard and asks fearfully what brought that violent group to the location. The leader says he learned that his sworn brother was humiliated there and came to collect the debt from the previous day. The young employee breaks out in a cold sweat when he realizes they are talking about the commotion that happened yesterday. Woliok realizes that the guys came to fight and decides that he needs to finish them off to have peace in the coming days. The desperate attendant begs them to stop and promises to provide financial compensation for what happened, but the brute shouts that he doesn't want money and promises to destroy the inn so that it never operates again. Then the protagonist appears complaining about the noise early in the morning and tells everyone to shut up at once. The henchmen look at him, thinking he's the handsome young man their partner mentioned earlier. Ignoring his enemies, he asks the attendant how long it will take for his food to be ready, knowing that it takes 15 minutes. The hero decides to resolve the situation quickly before the dish arrives. The warrior begins to walk calmly towards the invaders, leaving the men quite intrigued. Woliak points to the exit and tells the whole group to follow him to resolve that issue outside. One of the bandits gets angry and lunges forward, trying to grab him from behind. Blaming him for his companion's humiliation, the intruder manages to grab his clothes, but the protagonist coldly warns him to let go if he wants to live. The brute scoffs at the warning and prepares to deliver a violent blow to the arrogant boy. But with an extremely quick movement, the hero grabs the attacker's arm and throws him with all his might. The hero then lands a devastating kick to the enemy's chin, sending him flying and causing him to bleed profusely from the mouth. The invader's body falls unconscious onto the wooden floor, leaving his companions in complete shock. The henchmen are furious to see their ally defeated so easily right before their eyes. Woliak smiles, saying it would have been better if they had left, and orders everyone to come at once. The bandit leader angrily raises his axe and says that the boy is begging to die sooner. The bald guy in the group pulls out his spiked club and says, "She's finally going to taste fresh blood today." The other accomplice prepares his meat cleaver, eager to use it on a human being for the first time. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the cook asks the young assistant if he should really continue cooking. He fears that the meal will end up being nothing more than a funeral offering for the customer who is arguing. The gang leader runs angrily towards the protagonist, shouting for his men to finish him off. The brute delivers a powerful vertical blow with his heavy axe, attempting to split the young man in two. The sharp blade descends with impressive speed, cutting through the air directly towards the protagonist. However, the axe shatters completely upon impact, leaving the young attendant terrified. The enemy leader stares confusedly at the piece of wood that remains in his hands, completely bewildered. The protagonist moves his hand, holding his chopsticks with extreme precision and calmness. With a quick and precise strike, the hero hits the bandit leader in the face, who screams in pain from the impact. The hero's gaze remains cold and focused as he prepares for the next opponent ahead. He spins his body quickly and delivers another precise attack, knocking down another criminal. The enemy violently hits the ground, spitting out a lot of blood after receiving the warrior's devastating blow. The last remaining accomplice tries to surprise him from behind, advancing with a sharp dagger towards him, but the hero masterfully dodges the blow, causing the blade to pass right through without even touching him. Woliak clenches his fist tightly, concentrating his inner energy to unleash the final blow. A powerful punch lands squarely on the opponent's jaw, causing him to lose several teeth in the violent impact. In a few seconds, all the invaders end up knocked out and lying on the wooden floor of the inn. Guangte is speechless when he realizes that the boy's strength was even greater than he could have imagined. The protagonist challenges the last bandit standing, asking why he's standing still and ordering him to attack immediately. Trembling with fear, the bald man says that they weren't that close and tries to avoid the imminent fight. Meanwhile, his two companions remain unconscious on the ground, completely defeated and bleeding. Another bandit trembles on the ground, bleeding from his nose and mouth after being quickly knocked out. Woliak coldly warns that he doesn't care about their relationship, but since they drew weapons against him, they all deserve to die. The bald man becomes desperate and tries to launch an attack with his spiked club, yelling at the hero to shut up. But the man's eyes widen in complete shock as he realizes the absurd speed at which the young man is moving. A deafening sound echoes through the hall as the protagonist effortlessly deflects the enemy attack. the brute is thrown with such force that he goes through the doors of the inn and falls to the ground outside. The staff at the site stand frozen, staring at the entrance, unable to believe the boy's tremendous strength. Woliak calmly informs them that it will take them hours to wake up and orders the staff to take them away. Guangta swallows hard in admiration, thinking that this young man must be one of the legendary martial artists from history. Later, the hero continues his journey, climbing an immense mountain surrounded by a mysterious mist and natural landscapes. He climbs the steep cliffs, leaping from rock to rock with impressive agility and lightness, thanks to his training. The boy takes a deep breath, knowing that wild and preserved forests should contain a greater amount of pure energy. But he finds it strange that that mountain seems to have little vital energy available in its surroundings. With this, the hero begins to wonder if he has taken the wrong path, and if he will need to turn back to find the correct place. Suddenly, he feels a different vibration coming from the middle of the trees and turns around quickly, intrigued by the sensation. Upon spotting an ancient, gleaming tree in the middle of the woods, he realizes that it emanates an absurd amount of pure power. The mystical mountain stretches above the clouds, sheltering that natural treasure hidden from any ordinary person. That place is the point where all the energy veins of the earth intersect, concentrating the purest essence of nature. Woliak realizes with surprise that he has found a dragon vein where all the natural power of that mountain is accumulated. He closes his eyes calmly, feeling the spiritual breezes, and prepares to begin a deep meditation there. Through his special technique, the protagonist begins to pull and absorb all that powerful energy into his body. Its power center, which had already been expanded by the ancient ginseng, now opens to receive this new vital source. A massive amount of raw energy from Mother Nature flows rapidly into your abdomen, purifying everything. The union of ginseng's energy with the pure power of the forest begins to refine and strengthen the hero's entire physical structure. Even the last traces of the cold venom in his veins are destroyed, giving way to a perfectly strong body. Feeling this surge of absolute power, he proudly thinks that he can now face the celestial demon himself. But he quickly shakes his head, realizing that this bold thought is nothing more than mere arrogance on his part at that moment. He knows that confronting the entire sect would be suicide, but he rejoices in being able to channel his energy into his weapons of combat. Woliak took a crucial step towards becoming an elite master before calmly returning to his humble favorite inn. Seated at a lavish table laden with food, the protagonist politely thanks the employee for all the good hospitality. The young man smiles, saying that he is the one who should be grateful because he ate extremely well and managed to have a wonderful rest. Then the old cook appears in the hall carrying a special bottle, saying it would be a shame to let him go without a gift. He proudly offers the young guest a high-quality traditional drink famous throughout the Jiangxi region. Woliak is surprised to think that in his past life, he was known in the sect as a real bottomless pit of drink, but the boy tries to refuse, saying he came to train his mind, while the attendant shouts, impressed by the precious drink. Upon learning that it is the legendary liquor that most will never taste in their lives, the hero's mouth waters, and he gives up refusing the glass. Moments later, the warrior is seen staggering quite badly, taking uncertain and unsteady steps in the middle of the dirt path. He realizes with irritation that his mind remains fully alert, but that his current body is incredibly weak when it comes to alcohol. With his face completely red, he complains about being drunk after only 2 glasses and curses his terrible resistance. Staggering, he finally reaches a wooden gate and knocks weakly, asking if anyone is inside. Inside, an employee sweeping the yard hears the loud banging and the impatiently calling out loud voice at the gate. The chubby servant stops what he's doing and is very surprised to immediately recognize the voice of the young sect master. He throws his broom aside and runs as fast as he can to open the heavy wooden gates of the main entrance. Woliok stumbles in, arguing with the servant, irritated by the delay in opening the gates for his triumphant arrival. The assistant's eyes widen when he sees the master, and he makes a funny face when he smells a very strong odor coming from the boy. Macta then asks, alarmed, if the young master had really been drinking alcohol while he was away. The employee trembles with worry because he knows that the boy used to get drunk just from the smell of alcohol in the past. The hero lets out a loud sob and indignantly complains about that terrible feeling of dizziness persisting in his body for so long. He grumbles that he drank late the previous night with acquaintances from the inn. And that's why the effects of the alcohol are still lingering. Upon hearing this, the faithful servant begins to weep copiously, thinking of the enormous emotional suffering his young master went through. Macte cries, thinking that he would fight in the young master's place if he could, but is interrupted by a shout calling his name. The servant wipes away tears and forces a weak smile in response to the call, so as not to worry the young leader of the sect. Woliok directly asks what the servant knows about the sword techniques practiced by the Heavenly Origin sect. Macte turns around, extremely confused by the sudden question, and wonders why the young man wants to know that. The protagonist gets annoyed by the stalling, while the servant explains that he finds it strange that he suddenly becomes interested in swords. Macte tries to change the subject, telling the boy to rest, while he informs the sect leader about his return. Woliok finally loses his patience and shouts furiously, demanding that the assistant stop stalling and answer his question immediately. Startled, the servant reveals that they only practice the technique of celestial origin and some common arts of wandering Ronin. The protagonist becomes thoughtful upon hearing about this martial art and asks where the secret manual for this technique is kept. The servant desperately begs the young master not to do anything reckless as he guides him to the sect's library. Macte warns worriedly that he will be severely punished by the sect leader if he is caught drunk inside that file room. Ignoring the servant's warnings, the hero opens the sword manual and is completely shocked by what he sees on its pages. He examines the discredited content, thinking that it's all utter nonsense with no practical sense whatsoever. Woliok indignantly questions how they can call that a secret manual while Macta watches him. Completely bewildered, the warrior says he needs to confirm if that is indeed the real manual, and the servant assures him that it is. As it is in the file, he complains that the book seems like just a cheap self-defense manual for common thugs without any advanced techniques. Macte insists frightened, stating with absolute certainty that that book is indeed the true secret manual. The hero asks how he can be so sure, and the strange servant asks if he has truly forgotten the past. Woliok stares intently at the chubby boy and demands to know which old event he's talking about at that moment. The servant recalls the terrible incident from the past, where the sect was nearly destroyed and the original manual turned to ashes. The protagonist is in absolute shock upon discovering that his current sect was once on the verge of total annihilation. Macte explains that the current leader recreated the technique using only childhood memories of ancient teachings. With that, the servant concludes by saying aloud that this is why the secret manual seems so incomplete and simple. The young man reflects in surprise upon realizing that even a small and humble sect like that one carries such a tragic past. He wonders what happened there, but realizes that teaching techniques with such a poor manual will be a great challenge. Suddenly, the servant hears a voice outside calling for the young master, and both look intrigued towards the door. The supreme leader of the sect enters the room imposingly and asks his son directly if he has finally returned. Woliok bows respectfully before the elder and formally confirms that he is back at the residence. The elderly man approaches his son, and his expression changes to one of complete surprise upon noticing something different. The father asks if he's been drinking while the hero thinks, impressed, that the old man has the sense of smell of a hunting dog. Woliak tries to justify himself by saying that he only had a single farewell drink with an acquaintance from the inn. The father laments, recalling that his son had never drunk before, and asks worriedly if things are very difficult for him. The boy quickly denies it, trying to reassure his father, and says directly that he is feeling perfectly fine. The sect leader says he understands his sense of responsibility, but claims that burden is too heavy for his son. The hero begins to lose patience and retorts loudly, angrily saying that his father is misunderstanding everything. The old man assures that he will cancel the scheduled duels, and that his son only needs to offer a simple apology to resolve everything. Woliak shouts furiously, begging his father to stop, and repeats that the situation is nothing like what he thinks. The leader is furious at his son's audacity, while Macte tries to restrain him, saying that the young master is still drunk. The patriarch shouts indignantly, asking how this could have happened to his son, who had been so well behaved before. Sitting at his desk, the father complains that his son has never challenged him before, while Macte asks him to calm his heart. The supreme leader angrily questions what has happened in the last few days to cause the boy's behavior to change so drastically. The chubby servant comments that this abrupt change in attitude began after the last incident with the White Dragon Sect. He reveals that the young master is using full slang and now prefers to resolve everything with punches and kicks. Mate also points out, alarmed, that the boy's physical structure seems to have grown and become too strong in recent days. The father coughs imposingly, proudly stating that having a strong and resilient physique is a great family inheritance. The servant adds that the real problem is that the young master seems like a different person with very deep martial arts knowledge. The supreme leader finds the comment strange and reminds him that his knowledge of the martial world has always been quite extensive. Macte hesitates considerably before continuing, but the old man demands that he tell the whole truth once and for all. Meanwhile, the hero continues reading the book, annoyed by the poorly drawn and unexplained sword techniques. The father says his son respects the manual, while Macta silently recalls that the young man just broke a vase in anger. The patriarch leafs through the sword manual, not understanding his son's complaint, and sees no problem with the book. He points to the simple stick figure illustrations, saying that everything looks incredibly clear on the pages. The servant forces a nervous smile, agreeing that the simple illustrations are indeed quite easy to understand. The boss asks if the young master really wants to take that manual he called a mess to study for a few days. The servant confirms that the young man also asked to use the training room alone, leaving the leader quite thoughtful. The chubby assistant suggests that the boy is simply trying to better prepare for the next duel. The boss approves the request, but secretly orders the servant to keep an eye on the son and report any strange behavior. The faithful assistant accepts the order immediately, promising to closely watch his young master's every move. Moments later in the hallway, the servant sighs with relief at having managed to resolve that situation without further problems. He returns happily to the hero's room, bringing the sword manual and advising the boy to get plenty of rest. The protagonist thanks him for the sword manual and suggests that the servant also go to his quarters to rest a bit. But the servant is startled to see the hero turn his back and walk purposefully towards the exit of the room. Woliak curtly announces that he's heading straight to the training room and says that no one needs to follow him. Persistent, the assistant starts walking right behind him, claiming in a friendly manner that he will only be providing his personal escort. The young man stops and suspiciously asks if the servant has no other obligation or if this is a direct order from his father. The chubby man flashes a genuine smile, saying that his greatest mission in life is simply to protect and serve the young leader. The hero asks the reason for such loyalty, and the servant reveals that he is grateful because the boy gave him the life he has today. Macte turns around emotionally, explaining that he only wishes to repay all the kindness he received from the young master in the past. This reminds him of when he was just a small street beggar, despised by everyone who passed by the local market. The little boy was crying from hunger, begging the owner of a stall to give him a single dumpling to eat, so he could survive. But the wicked merchant rudely attacks him, calling him a liar and telling the little beggar to get out of there. The little boy was sobbing, crying a lot and sobbing that he was only chubby because of the swelling caused by hunger. Suddenly, a mysterious young man appears at the stall and orders the vendor to prepare a large quantity of dumplings. The merchant's eyes widen as he recognizes the young master of the prestigious celestial sect in that place. The man bows politely, promising to expedite the order, while the boy demands that there be plenty of food in the package. The hero hands the generous bowl of steaming food to the hungry little boy, who thanks him, crying with emotion. The merchant reveals that the boy's parents abandoned him very early, and that he survived only by begging on the street. The young leader looks with deep compassion and pity at the boy who was desperately eating while sitting on the dirt floor. He calmly approaches the abandoned child and very gently asks what the little boy's name was. The boy wipes his dirty face and timidly replies in a trembling voice, revealing to the master that his name is Macte. With a beautiful smile on his face, the protagonist extends his hand and affectionately invites the boy to leave with him. The chubby boy fondly remembers being adopted that day, and that, because of that, he would follow the young master to the ends of the earth. The hero questions whether the boy is truly happy acting as a mere servant instead of being an official disciple. Macte admits to being envious of his disciples, but says he enjoys learning in secret and is grateful for having food and a bed. He concludes by saying that he lives each day focused solely on repaying the immense generosity that the young master showed him. The hero glances at him sideways, thinking that he is a very loyal guy with a great physique for sword training. They finally arrive at their destination, and the chubby guy announces that the two have just reached the training yard. The protagonist looks around and thinks sarcastically that the place is exactly what you'd expect from a third-rate cult. The servant insists, worried, once again suggesting that the young leader should just rest for today and conserve his strength. Woliak stops walking and calls his companion's name seriously, making the chubby one respond promptly. With a cold and intimidating look, the warrior orders that from that moment on, he should never question his orders again. The servant swallows hard, feeling the immense spiritual pressure from the master, and agrees nervously, without daring to say anything more. The boy asks if he really learned fencing in secret, and the servant confesses that he only learned by watching from afar. With that, the hero picks up one of the wooden swords from the stand and prepares to begin an intense training session. The hero challenges the servant with a smile on his face, promising to grant any wish if he manages to hit him just once. Macte assumes a firm fighting stance, gripping his wooden weapon, and earnestly warns the young leader. He shouts a warning that he will not be responsible if he is hurt and charges forward, delivering a swift attack with his sword. The boy analyzes his friend's disorganized movements, realizing that the technique is indeed a mess without any theoretical basis. He defends all attacks with ease, noting that despite his weak base, the chubby one possesses good attack power. The servant continues pressing in combat and praises, surprised, the young master's incredible speed and defensive reflexes. The protagonist smiles slightly, thinking that the servant is promising but will need to correct his fighting stance a bit. Suddenly, he announces that the demonstration was sufficient, taking his chubby companion completely by surprise. Woliak moves quickly, delivering several precise blows to end the fight and assess his abilities. The sounds of sharp blows on wood echo throughout the training area as the strike is quickly finished. Macte appears with his face all bruised and battered, but stubbornly insists that he can still keep fighting. Night falls silently over the gates of the temple, where everything is about to begin. In the training yard, the young man begins to practice his movements with a wooden sword. He reflects that the art of the celestial origin sword is too weak for real combat. That's why he decides to completely redesign this technique to make it truly useful in battle. Using only basic movements as a foundation, he begins to shape his own fighting style. The warrior seeks inspiration in an ancient, lost technique to strengthen his strikes. This is a legendary and powerful style composed of 13 extremely destructive stances. This art was forgotten because its advanced strikes require an absurd amount of internal energy. Despite the great risk, mastering it grants extraordinary power capable of defeating any enemy. The secret manual ended up locked in a vault after the destruction of the ancient sect that created it. Only a very few members of the cult knew of the existence of this valuable guarded secret. It filters out similar techniques and condenses everything into an efficient variation of 8 postures. He can currently use 4 of them, which is more than enough to win the duel. Meanwhile, the young servant walks through the silent courtyard during the dark night. With his body aching from recent training, he hears strange noises coming from the arena. Curious, the boy wonders if anyone would be training so late in that isolated location. He suspects he might be the young leader and decides to sneak up to check. The servant peers through a crack in the wooden door, his eyes wide with surprise. Suddenly, he sees a rapid movement and a blue flash cutting through the air at high speed. The protagonist executes perfect and swift strikes, unleashing a powerful energy around him. Impressed, the servant can hardly believe the boy's incredible display of skill. The force of the final impact is so absurd that the wooden sword shatters completely. He is shocked to see how drastically the young leader has changed and become so powerful. The boy senses that the master has become a supreme warrior capable of defeating any opponent. At that moment, an unexpected noise startled the servant, who quickly looked back, worried. The arrogant Dan Waldwong walks imposingly through the courtyard under the moonlight. The servant quickly hides, not understanding why the man appeared so late. Waldwong displays a serious and determined expression, focused solely on spying on his opponent. He cautiously approaches and begins to observe the place where his brother should be. Knowing that there would be a duel the next day, he wonders what kind of training is taking place. Looking out into the courtyard, he sees the protagonist meditating calmly under a strong, bright aura. He scoffs at the scene, believing that his brother still resorts to weak methods of spiritual cultivation. With an arrogant smile, the rival is absolutely certain that tomorrow's victory is already his. He thinks that not even their father will be able to contest his succession after the outcome of the battle. The confident warrior already imagines himself taking definitive command of the entire sect. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues meditating in silence, completely oblivious to the presence of others. He keeps his mind focused and serene, preparing his spirit for the confrontation that is approaching. The day finally dawns, revealing a clear sky over the temple where the duel will take place. All the disciples of the sect gather around the arena, eager to watch the combat. The elder announces the start of the decisive confrontation between the young leader and Captain Wolgwong. He warns that victory will be declared the moment one of the combatants surrenders. When questioned by the judge, the protagonist firmly replies that he is ready to fight. Wolgwong also confirms his readiness with a confident and intimidating tone of voice. The elder warns that the duel will begin soon as he draws his sword from its sheath. The rival taunts the protagonist, saying he expects to see his true skills in the arena. The young leader merely observes his opponent with disdain, unfazed by his sarcastic tone. With a swift movement, the judge draws his weapon and shouts to officially begin the combat. Wolgwong takes his stance and challenges his brother, ordering him to attack first without fear. The hero surprises by offering the advantage, allowing the rival to land the first 3 blows. Wolguang becomes extremely furious when he realizes he is being treated like a mere amateur. Furious at his brother's provocation, Dan Wolguang quickly advances at full speed. He shouts with determination and delivers a powerful blow using his wooden sword against the boy. The attacker's eyes widen as he tries to maintain a steady posture to hit his target. Protagonist realizes that the rival's attack is completely out of sync and blocks it without any difficulty. The opponent loses his balance completely and curses angrily when he sees that his aggressive attack has failed. With complete serenity, the young leader calmly announces that the 3 promised attacks have already been launched. Wolguang breaks out in a cold sweat of nervousness when he realizes he couldn't even touch his younger brother. The hero declares that he has fulfilled his promise, and now the time has come to put things in their proper place. He points his training weapon menacingly, showing that the real fight is about to begin. The rival is extremely confused and outraged, unable to understand the immense confidence shown by his brother. The 2 fighters face each other while the entire sect watches anxiously to see how the duel unfolds. The protagonist initiates a swift movement with his feet, silently advancing towards his opponent. He demonstrates impressive body control, gliding flawlessly across the arena floor. The rival panics when he notices that the boy's movements are too fast to follow. In a fraction of a second, the young leader appears right in front of him, leaving his opponent without a chance to react. He plants his feet abruptly on the ground, preparing to deliver the decisive surprise blow. Startled by the speed, the opponent lets out a cry of terror as he tries to react in any way. He makes a desperate circular motion, just to try and push the protagonist away and gain space. The hero analyzes the attack and realizes that it was just a weak defensive play, lacking any technique. The opponent bites his lip in frustration upon seeing that his counter-attack attempt was ineffective. With extreme agility, the hero easily dodges the wooden blow and penetrates the opponent's defense. Wolguang's eyes widen as he realizes that his brother managed to get past his defensive barrier effortlessly. The protagonist notes that the opponent's lack of combativeness reveals a complete absence of real experience. He takes advantage of the opening and lands a precise blow that makes his opponent groan in pain upon being hit. The audience is in complete shock, unable to believe how easily the fight is unfolding. The wounded boy grinds his teeth, feeling the impact of the attack and the humiliation in front of everyone present. He tries to recover and mentally wonders how that humiliation could really be happening. He finds it hard to believe that this agile warrior is the same sickly brother he so despised in the past. The warrior begins to think that the rumors about his brother breaking his physical curse are actually true. Denying reality, he convinces himself that the protagonist was simply lucky and moves forward to attack again. The hero moves his feet with extreme speed, once again dodging the attack with extreme grace. The 2 exchange swift attacks, but the protagonist excels at dodging and defending each charge. The rival tries to block the boy's advance, but feels the crushing weight of each blow delivered against him. Wolguang is completely stunned when he loses sight of his opponent for a fraction of a second. The young leader leaps spectacularly into the air, preparing to end the fight once and for all. With a slight smile on his face, the protagonist warns that the opponent's defense is completely open. He executes a spectacular blow that strikes his rival's chest with extreme violence, causing him to scream in pain. Plummeting towards the ground, the opponent cannot accept that he was defeated in such a humiliating way. The hero quickly spins his wooden sword, preparing a final blow to end the duel. The gun's handle strikes the opponent's chin with precision, cutting off any chance of reaction. The opponent is thrown backward, falling heavily to the arena floor, completely defeated and powerless. Spectators scream Wolguang's name in utter despair as they see the captain lying on the ground. The other disciples wonder in disbelief how the young leader managed to defeat the strongest opponent. The protagonist looks at his fallen rival with a calm expression and asks what he thinks he's doing. Still dazed on the ground, the defeated warrior responds in a confused manner, not understanding what happened. The hero coldly questions him, asking how long he plans to lie there pretending to be hurt. He puts his weapon away with an elegant movement, demonstrating that the dispute has indeed come to an end. The boy explains that he only used the handle of the training sword to avoid seriously severely, injuring his brother. Even humiliated, the boy tries to get up, leaning on his weapon while breathing with difficulty. He stares at the hero with an expression of pure hatred and astonishment, unable to accept that humiliating defeat. The rival stands up furious and shouts that he will no longer hold back as he lunges at the protagonist. He attempts to launch another attack, but the hero easily deflects his wooden weapon with precise movements. The cult leader watches the duel in shock, noticing that his son has mastered a legendary footwork technique. He wonders, intrigued, how that frail boy managed to learn such an impressive skill. Patriarch believes that the young man defeated his opponent with such ease that even himself would have had difficulty. Walguang lets out another angry cry when he sees that all his attacks continue to be completely useless. The rival recoils in fear and desperately questions what the protagonist is planning to do with him. In the audience, the young woman watches the situation, frightened and unable to understand the hero's cold and merciless attitude. The cult leader asks her to remain calm and simply continue watching the confrontation in silence. The protagonist looks disdainfully and curtly orders his opponent to stand up because the duel is not over yet. He provokes his opponent by asking if someone so weak really thought he could assume leadership of the sect. Walguang stares at his older brother through clenched teeth, burning with hatred for the humiliation he is suffering. Desperate, he advances once more, delivering chaotic blows and shouting that the fight continues. The hero realizes that his rival's sword is blinded by rage, leaving only predictable and empty movements. The boy attacks furiously, but his expression only shows the exhaustion and frustration of not being able to hit anything. With a calm and precise step, the protagonist moves sideways, easily exiting the line of attack. He thinks that his opponent's erratic breathing puts him on the level of a mere street fighter, without technique. The hero delivers a precise blow to the rival's face, who begins to bleed after the devastating impact of the training weapon. The boy falls heavily to the ground and tries to stammer a surrender, but is interrupted by the protagonist's coldness. The hero denies the end of the fight and ironically asks where all that arrogance from before went. Walguang looks up, utterly terrified, as he sees the immense cruelty in his own brother's eyes. The protagonist coldly states that, from his point of view, the opponent's style resembles that of a common butcher. The disciples in the audience comment in surprise that they never imagined seeing the young leader fight with such perfection. They conclude that, with that brilliant technique, everyone in the sect should start receiving teachings from him. The little servant watches from afar, marveling, unable to understand how the master became so strong. Offended by the malicious comment, the rival becomes even more enraged and shouts, demanding to know what he meant. The hero calmly repeats that his blows resemble those of a butcher slicing up animals without any criteria. Walguang stands up, shouting indignantly at the grotesque comparison, and asks if his brother has finished speaking. With an icy stare, the hero honestly replies that that is exactly the level he sees in his rival. The brother shouts desperately, reminding everyone that he is a highly respected commander within that sect. He swears that no one besides their father had ever managed to defeat him in direct combat until that day. The furious boy attacks again, but the hero dodges and blocks all movements with extreme ease. The protagonist asks if the rival truly believes that emotionally driven attacks would be able to harm him. The opponent is left speechless when he realizes that his brute strength is no match for his brother's refined technique. The two training swords clash violently as the hero continues pressing down without giving room for retreat. He points out his opponent's flaws, criticizing his clumsy footwork and his technically empty strikes. With a swift movement, the boy strikes his opponent and declares that all that incompetence is unacceptable. The hero laments that the current level of the entire sect has fallen to the point of accepting such a weak warrior. He lands another devastating blow to his brother's ribs, who doubles over in pain as he completely loses his breath. Wolguang groans loudly, feeling his body weaken as the pain from the impact spreads rapidly through his muscles. His hands begin to tremble violently as he tries to grip the wooden sword against his brother's unstoppable advance. He bends over, exhausted and badly injured, unable to find the strength to continue that disastrous fight. The entire arena watches the silent massacre, shocked by the enormous power disparity between the two brothers. The patriarch realizes that the outcome of the duel is already completely decided, and there is no chance of a reversal. However, he begins to wonder, intrigued, why his eldest son is acting with such cruelty. The young woman beside him trembles with worry, fearing that the fight will end in a terrible family tragedy. The younger brother tries to block yet another attack, while wondering how the hero always hid so much power. He finally acknowledges that his opponent's skills are on a completely unattainable level for him. The hero delivers a final blow from above, knocking down the rival for good and ending any resistance. Wolguang falls defeated, his face covered in bruises, breathing with extreme difficulty on the dirt floor. The protagonist coldly tells his rival to hold his sword properly, because he would already be dead in a real battle. The opponent tries to plead with his brother while being pressed against the ground, unable to free himself in any way. The cult leader can no longer bear to watch the massacre and shouts furiously, ordering the fighting to stop immediately. The opponent spits blood from sheer exhaustion, feeling the overwhelming pressure the protagonist is placing on his body. The spectators in the arena watch the scene in terror, unable to hide their panic at what they see. The desperate father shouts once more, ordering his sons with all his might to end the fight immediately. The hero spins his wooden sword at the last second, demonstrating an absurd level of control over his movements. He delivers a thunderous blow that shatters his rival's weapon into several pieces of wood scattered across the ground. Wolguang stands motionless, his face bleeding, completely shocked by the ruthless display of power. The protagonist keeps his sword pointed at his opponent, patiently waiting for a definitive answer. Completely broken and powerless, the proud rival finally surrenders, murmuring that he accepts defeat in the duel. Upon hearing the surrender, the young leader gently puts away his training weapon, maintaining his usual indifferent gaze. The opponent collapses unconscious face down on the arena floor, completely exhausted physically and mentally. He lies motionless, breathing with immense difficulty, and blood continues to stream down his face. The hero observes him in silence, thinking that the only praiseworthy characteristic in his brother is his great stubbornness. The camera focuses on the defeated young man's hand, which, even unconscious, continues to hold the broken hilt of his own sword. Several members of the sect run desperately towards the arena, shouting for the wounded captain to come to their aid. They carry the unconscious boy out of there, while the protagonist remains completely isolated in the courtyard. The young leader thinks to himself that his brother will have to start from scratch if he really wants to catch up with him someday. The patriarch observes his eldest son from afar with a serious expression, full of doubt about what he has just seen. Dusk takes over the sky, covering the temple rooftops, while an air of mystery hangs over the place. Later, inside the main chambers, the leader harshly demands explanations about what happened. The protagonist stands silently before his father, patiently waiting for the interrogation to begin. The patriarch says he waited a long time believing that his son would tell the truth voluntarily someday. However, he states authoritatively that he will no longer accept excuses today and needs a clear answer immediately. The hero worries that even though he has prepared a made-up story, it will always have flaws that are easy to spot. The father recalls that he was born with blocked energy channels, making any kind of martial arts cultivation impossible. But given what he saw, he demands to know how the boy surpassed his younger brother and accumulated so much inner energy. The protagonist swallows hard when he realizes he will need to improvise a very convincing excuse at that moment. He takes a deep breath and begins to narrate a false story, saying that it all started a long time ago during a trip The young man states earnestly that he was incredibly lucky to have stumbled upon a rare, miraculous opportunity. The father listens, intrigued, and asks in surprise what kind of miraculous event his sick son could have experienced. He tries to understand the details as the young man's fabricated story continues to unfold in the room. The hero lies, saying he traveled to a famous sacred mountain with the goal of trying to train his frail body. He says that by pure chance he ended up unearthing a very old wild ginseng root in the forest. The boy explains that the plant's energy purified his body, allowing him to finally cultivate internal energy. The patriarch slams his fist on the table furiously and rages that the story makes absolutely no scientific or medical sense. The protagonist sweats profusely upon realizing that his father didn't easily believe the lie he had just invented. The father angrily recalls that he gave him the best herbs, hundreds of years old, since childhood, and nothing had any effect. The hero becomes tense, wondering if he should exaggerate the lie by saying that the plant was thousands of years old. He tries to correct the story by saying that the root was over 700 years old and that he refined its pure energy. The patriarch shouts indignantly, stating that he has never heard of such an absurd method in his entire life as a warrior. The father stands up and demands the truth, reminding him that he hired the best doctors on the continent to try and cure him. The protagonist stammers nervously, trying to quickly invent a new excuse to get out of that complicated situation. He looks to the side, sweating profusely, while his mind races to create another convincing lie. Desperate, the young man quickly states that the person responsible for the miraculous treatment was no ordinary doctor. He claims he heard about this revolutionary method from a master specialist in strengthening weak bodies. The father is suspicious of the excuse and demands to know immediately the name of this supposed expert. The protagonist's eyes widen in complete panic, unsure what name to give the invented character. Patriarch pressures him, stating that he would surely know the name of the person who miraculously saved his life. He makes up at the last minute that this incredible person is none other than a grandmaster. His father is completely surprised to hear this unexpected revelation about a hidden master. The young leader firmly confirms that he was secretly trained by this mysterious master. The patriarch repeats the information, shocked and unable to believe what he has just heard. Woliak explains the crossed paths with that man by chance in the forest and never knew his name. He says the elder taught him to consume a spiritual herb full of pure energy. The father is impressed to realize that his son has met a living legend from the world of stories. The patriarch asks if he harvested the ginseng recently, but the young man says it was much earlier. The hero explains that he continued training in isolation just to fully absorb this power. Father silently reflects that not even the miracle herb could justify such rapid progress. He gets emotional seeing that his son overcame his illness on his own to pursue a martial path. The patriarch believes that the heavens sent that master as a reward for his effort. He asks if the boy also learned the celestial sword technique just by reading the manual. Without hesitation, the protagonist lies again, confirming that he learned everything on his own. Proud and crying with emotion, the father hugs his son tightly, celebrating his great victory. Embarrassed by the situation, the young leader politely asks his father to release him immediately. Woliak takes the opportunity to ask if he is now allowed to have the decisive duel. The father enthusiastically agrees and tells his son to demonstrate the sect's strength to its adversaries. But before ending the conversation, the patriarch announces that he has one last important request to make. The scene changes to a small, rustic tavern located on a distant and isolated mountain. The establishment seems quite calm at the moment, surrounded by a dense and silent forest. Suddenly, the wooden door of the place opens, announcing the arrival of a mysterious visitor. The man enters calling for someone, while the elderly man who looks after the place appears to assist him. The friendly gentleman calmly approaches and asks how he can help the newcomer. The visitor introduces himself as Jum Salmon and reveals that he has come to make a request to the head of the household. The old man warns that all meals require prior reservation in order to be served. The boy says he doesn't care and places a gold bar on the table to seal the deal. He demands a quick response from the boss, and the old man asks him to wait a moment in the living room. The gentleman examines a secret letter and exclaims in surprise at what is written. Jum-saman emphasizes that the delivery deadline is short and must be strictly met within 5 days. The old man carefully puts away the note and silently heads towards the back kitchen. He enters the reserved room to consult the mysterious head chef about the special request. The customer waits anxiously outside for the final answer regarding that highly secret order. The gentleman returns and informs that the requested items will be delivered by a messenger in 4 days. Jum-saman breaks into a victorious smile as he realizes his plan is going perfectly. The elderly man explains that the remaining payment should only be made after the service is fully completed. The warrior earnestly warns that no one from his own faction can know about this transaction. The old man simply smiles knowingly, assuring them that their secret is completely safe. With the deal finally sealed, the young warrior bids farewell and begins to leave the place. He thinks with satisfaction that that secret organization of assassins always keeps its promises. Meanwhile, night falls silently over the main dormitories of the Wooliock sect. The hero is lying in his quarters when he suddenly opens his eyes, noticing something strange. He remains lying down, paying close attention to very familiar footsteps approaching. The boy remains motionless in bed while a mysterious silhouette slowly enters the room. The shadow leans over him, holding something, but the hero prepares to act quickly. He focuses all his attention on the intruder, waiting for the exact moment to disarm the threat. With an impressive reflex, he grabs the person's arm, who lets out a cry of surprise. The hero gets up angrily and demands to know what the intruder thinks he's doing there so late. Upon noticing who it is, he is surprised to see that it is just the young Aaron, blushing deeply. The protagonist stares at her seriously and asks why she entered his room like that. Aaron complains of pain and angrily asks him to release her arm immediately. Woolek is surprised and releases the girl without fully understanding the reason for her reaction. The protagonist asks if she tried to attack him and demands that she tell the truth right away. Aaron is quite embarrassed and grumbles, saying that she didn't even manage to land a hit on him. He jokingly says that she planned to attack him and therefore deserves to be punished for that behavior. The young woman blushes even more and looks away, claiming she knows nothing about this punishment. The boy scratches his head, confused, and questions why she would play such a joke so early in the morning. He asks if it's because of a lack of affection, but she angrily denies it, saying she only came to seek revenge against him. The hero is completely astonished by the answer and asks who she is trying to get revenge on. The little girl reveals with determination that she has come to avenge the defeat Wolgwong suffered in the recent duel. The protagonist tries to calm her down by saying it was just a friendly training exercise, but she refuses to accept it. Aaron shouts that he saw the injured young man groaning in pain in his room because of the beating he received. Wooliock is surprised by the accusations and asks who was responsible for spreading this gossip. She replies without hesitation that the one who told the whole fabricated story was the servant named Macte. The hero becomes extremely furious and rages, promising to cut out the tongue of that gossipy servant. The girl starts crying loudly, lamenting the cruel fate that awaits the poor Sect employee. Desperate at her crying, the young leader tries to apologize, saying it was just a figure of speech. At that exact moment, Wolgwong himself appears at the door and asks what's going on there. The wounded warrior approaches, worried, and asks the girl why she is crying. Relieved by his arrival, the protagonist says that his brother appeared at the perfect moment to help. He orders the boy to take the girl away from there and explain in detail how the duel really went. As they walk away, the frightened young woman recounts the threat, and the hero shouts that he never actually said that. Sometime later, the two brothers are walking through the courtyard, and the hero asks if the misunderstanding has been resolved. The brother confirms that he explained everything, while the protagonist thinks he needs to watch his words around her. Wolguang seriously says he will confront Makta for distorting the facts in such a silly way, but the hero says that he himself will take care of teaching the boy a lesson so that he learns to be quiet. The boy is sweating nervously and feels immense pity for what will happen to the gossipy servant soon. The protagonist observes the empty training yard and comments that the place looks very deserted today. He silently wonders if that lack of movement reflects a decadent and weak faction. The hero considers whether it would be more advantageous to abandon the Sect and follow his own journey alone. The brother explains that everyone is busy working, and the protagonist finds this kind of routine strange. He says that the Sect doesn't have enough money to support everyone, so they work and only train in the afternoon. Wolguang adds that the disciples should only start arriving there from noon onwards. The hero reflects that an organized sect should cover all the basic expenses of its members. He finds it absurd that warriors serve as a workforce instead of focusing solely on training. Wolyak asks if his father knows about this, and his brother confirms that the patriarch is always concerned about it. The young leader becomes thoughtful and focuses his serious gaze on the financial problems his family is facing. He decides he will speak to his father personally about this serious economic problem within the sect. The protagonist picks up a wooden sword and calls his brother to begin another daily training session. He is surprised to see that the boy already knew about the lesson and asks how he found out about the plan so early. The boy explains that the patriarch commented on the classes when he went to pay his morning greetings. The hero announces that he will teach him personally for 4 hours every day, and the brother is thrilled. Wolyak asks ironically if he doesn't want to train, but the boy says he wants it more than anything. He informs them that the order has already been approved by their father, and the warrior respectfully agrees to the routine. The hero asks if he was able to notice his own flaws and weaknesses during the previous combat. The brother admits that he couldn't keep up with the pace and completely failed to judge the distance to the target. The protagonist listens attentively to the response, assessing the warrior's level of self-criticism. He points out that his brother's big mistake is the lack of proper footwork to dominate the space. The hero explains that without good movement, it is impossible to strike the opponent, even with the best technique. He concludes by saying that the center of gravity should guide the sword to concentrate all the force on the impact. It demonstrates how to transfer body weight to the tip of the weapon to achieve a lethal and relentless attack. The younger brother pays close attention and understands the concept of weight change that was explained. The hero explains that it takes the body a while to put into practice what the mind has already perfectly understood. He reflects on the theory and knows that mastering these complex movements requires a lot of effort from the fighter. The young man agrees that constant practice and real battle experience are the most important things. Wolyak knows that this slow learning process cannot be solved quickly through ordinary training. He warns that the only way to speed up the process is by recording every movement of the feet as a reflex of the body. The brother is surprised by the revelation and wonders if there really is a way to do this. Without giving any warning, the protagonist quickly advances, delivering a swift blow against his brother. The hero claims that the best traditional method for learning techniques is by facing real combat for life. Wolguang complains of pain from the surprise attack and desperately begs to receive a wooden weapon as well. Ignoring the complaints, the leader continues hitting and warns that he needs to focus on the movement first. He continues to deliver blows, teaching that footwork technique requires the entire body to move in sync. After finishing the beating, the protagonist decides to end the training and tells his brother to find a doctor to rest. Lying on the ground and covered in bruises, the boy reluctantly thanks everyone for the day's rigorous lesson. Back in the main quarters, the sect leader shouts, shocked by the audacious proposal he has just heard. The hero calmly repeats the request, demanding authorization to manage finances and operations. The patriarch is suspicious of his son's behavior and asks what the real meaning is behind such a sudden request. He He explains that he wants to resolve the financial problems so that the warriors can focus solely on training. The father finds the idea completely absurd and seriously doubts the young man's ability to resolve such a crisis. He says he understands the good intentions, but questions what kind of skills the boy has to get money. The protagonist maintains his firm stance in the face of his father's distrust, remaining unfazed by his criticism. The patriarch angrily asks if his son has any idea how much it costs to maintain the general expenses of that entire sect. Woliak responds with extreme determination that he will find a way to cover all operational costs on his own. The father gets furious at his stubbornness and demands to know how he plans to get that amount without giving details. He turns his back, extremely irritated, and curtly orders his son to leave the room immediately. Realizing that his father will not give in so easily, the protagonist decides to resort to his last planned lie. The hero lies, saying that he found 2 ginseng roots and that he kept the second valuable plant a secret. He explains that he sold the ginseng for a fortune in gold, thinking that one day he would need that saved money. The patriarch's eyes widen in utter shock upon discovering that his son possessed another miraculous plant. The father finds it hard to believe that his son was so lucky to find 2 rare ginsengs on the same mountain. The hero offers an initial donation of 100 gold coins to prove that his financial offer is genuine. The cult leader is completely paralyzed and breathless on hearing the immense amount of money offered. The patriarch rejoices, saying that this is the will of heaven and that his son will surely be a great successor. He decides to hand over all authority of the sect to the young man, admitting that he already wanted to retire from training. The father says that his son can handle almost everything on his own and that he will announce the decision to all members. Woliak panics when he realizes the plan worked too well and tries to refuse the sudden responsibility. But the father says the decision is final, and the protagonist despairs at the unexpected turn the conversation takes. The patriarch grins greedily and excitedly asks if his son has any more gold hoarded away. The boy leaves the room in a cold sweat, grumbling that he only wanted to offer financial help from afar and not take on everything. He becomes desperate when he realizes that his well-crafted lie almost caused him to lose his entire accumulated fortune. He thinks irritably that his father is very clever, but suddenly he hears snoring noises coming from the temple garden. The hero spots the servant sleeping peacefully under a wooden kiosk and becomes extremely angry. He angrily approaches the slacker and shouts that he finally caught him red-handed sleeping during working hours. With a swift movement, the hero delivers a resounding slap to the gossipy servant's face to wake him up completely. The servant wakes up startled, crying in pain, and desperately asks why the young leader is hitting him. The protagonist points angrily and demands to know exactly what he has been talking about with the young Aaron. He angrily recounts that the girl tried to attack him because of the gossip, but the servant desperately denies the rumor. Moktai trembles with fear and is very confused to discover that the young woman actually tried to take revenge on the hero. The servant swears on his knees that he only told her about the friendly duel and that the girl misunderstood everything out of jealousy. The hero asks if that story is really true to be absolutely sure that he is not being deceived. The servant replies, startled, assuring that he would never invent such a lie for the young leader himself. Woliak scratches his chin thoughtfully, realizing that the young woman was indeed worried about him after all. The servant asks if he was upset with Aaron, but the hero quickly denies it in a rather defensive manner. The boy changes the subject and orders the servant to guide him immediately to the main warehouse of that sect. Shortly after, the employee announces that they have finally arrived at the site's food storage area. Upon entering, the protagonist notices that the warehouse is quite spacious, but it is practically empty and abandoned. He silently laments as he notices the extreme poverty of that warehouse. Realizing that the problems are only getting worse, the hero starts calling out loudly for a man named Jang in an attempt to wake him from a deep sleep. The employee wakes up startled, complaining about the noise, but the servant informs him that the young leader has come to see him. The boy wakes up startled and wipes the saliva from his mouth when he realizes he is standing before the highest authority in the place. He stammers a quick excuse claiming he just fell asleep while trying to organize the groceries. The protagonist stares at him seriously and asks directly what the name of that warehouse worker is. The man nervously introduces himself, revealing that his registered name in the sect is actually Jang Ho. The hero asks what his duties are and demands to receive the official accounting book of the place. As the young leader flips through the records, he is shocked to see the precarious situation noted on those pages. He warns that he will ask questions and that the boy will be punished for any mistake or forgiven if he tells the truth. The hero sharply questions the exact number of weapons the sect currently possesses. Jang Ho replies without hesitation that they have 40 swords, but that 8 of them are rusty and useless. The protagonist continues the interrogation, now asking about the warehouse's food stock. The employee lists in detail all the bags of grain and meat that are still kept there. The hero notices that the boy answered everything accurately, but realizes that the overall stock is painfully small. He walks thoughtfully through the huge empty shed and calls again for the person in charge of the temple's accounts. The boy asks how long the warriors could survive consuming only what is stored there. Jang Ho assesses the situation and replies that they could only manage for a maximum of 3 months without shopping. The hero asks what would happen if all warriors stopped working to train full-time. The employee responds with concern that with 3 daily meals, the stock would only last about a month. The accounting reveals that the counts simply don't balance, and their profit margin is completely zero. He explains that with the current finances, the deposit will be completely depleted before 4 months. The protagonist is outraged to realize how the previous administration allowed such extreme bankruptcy. He questions why the sect doesn't charge protection money to local businesses, and the boy stammers, frightened. The employee reveals, horrified, that they are unable to collect any money because of the rival White Dragon sect. The protagonist is extremely surprised and outraged to discover who is really responsible for that crisis. Jang Ho says that they used to have about 5 businesses paying protection fees, but everything changed all of a sudden. With the constant disputes against the White Dragon sect, they have been losing those clients, and now only 2 remain. The protagonist is quite surprised and confused to hear that they have been having so many disputes with the rival group. He discovers that the martial artists from the rival sect used to show up just to cause trouble and start petty fights. Recently, the rivals started openly threatening the local merchants so they would switch sides once and for all. The administrator reveals that now only the small merchants remain who find the rivals' fee too expensive to pay. The young leader realizes that the henchman who attacked his body in the past must have acted for the exact same financial reason. Macte says with relief that the situation could be worse, but the protagonist complains, not understanding how that would be a relief. With a confident smile, the hero states that once they destroy the rivals, all the clients will return to their sect. The 2 companions look at each other, quite worried, knowing that winning this dispute will not be such a simple task. Suddenly, the protagonist reaches out his hand and hands over a closed paper package, ordering them to take it right away. Jang Ho holds the bundle with both hands and asks, quite confused, what could be stored inside that package. Upon opening the paper, the 2 let out a cry of complete astonishment as they realize they are holding an absurd amount of gold. The hero explains that these are notes worth 200 taels of gold and orders them to use it all to supply the sect's warehouse. He orders them to buy new weapons and stock enough food to keep 100 warriors fed for at least 3 months. The young leader wants all the warriors to focus only on martial cultivation without having to worry about other obligations. Stammering a lot, the administrator gathers the courage to ask where the young man managed to get such a gigantic fortune. The young man warns coldly that this is none of his business and demands that, from now on, all financial decisions must go through him. The hero calculates that there should be money left over, and Jang Ho confirms, saying that supplying everything will cost only 30 taels of gold. The protagonist stares at him with a mysterious and focused look before making his next financial demand for the group. He orders the rest of the fortune to be used to buy mid- and high-level spiritual elixirs for his training. Jang Ho is totally shocked to hear about the spiritual elixirs, and the protagonist asks what is wrong with that. The young man calls the administrator by name in an imposing way, making the man respond quickly, with much respect and fear. The protagonist warns with an icy look that he should never make him repeat a direct or order given within that sect ever again. Trembling with fear, the employee bows deeply and guarantees that he will fulfill every one of the orders given by the young leader. Jang Ho bows before the door and wishes a safe trip back to the main temple for his new and mysterious master. While walking back, the protagonist calls for the servant to ask a very important question about their sect. The hero asks if the administrator is trustworthy, and the servant guarantees that the man considers the leader his great savior. McTay says that the man used to look after government warehouses, but ended up being unfairly accused of missing goods at the location. He was fired and thrown onto the streets with his family until the hero's father took him in, leaving the protagonist surprised by the injustice. The real culprit was the son of a powerful official, and that is why the poor administrator had to take the blame for everything alone. Upon reaching the main courtyard, the servant comments quite excitedly that many disciples showed up for training today. The sect members shout loudly and push themselves to the limit, executing their training strikes before the eyes of the young leader. Each warrior demonstrates enormous determination, throwing punches and kicks with total focus on their daily physical preparation. The pair of fighters trains with their wooden weapons, making fast and loud movements that cut through the air around them. The hero thinks the scene is pathetic, but the servant comments that they seem to be working very hard on those daily activities. The protagonist corrects him, saying that their training is so bad and inefficient that he can barely stand to watch it. Suddenly, some warriors who were training nearby notice the young leader's silent presence and stop everything. One of them warns his companions in a loud voice, ordering everyone to stop their activities and show the proper respect to the master. The disciples bow and greet the young man with great enthusiasm, saying it is an immense honor to receive him there in the training courtyard. The hero observes them seriously and wonders to himself why everyone is looking at him with so much expectation and pressure. One of the instructors speaks up and asks, with hope, if the young leader came there to give some martial instruction. The hero stares at him coldly and rebuffs the question, wanting to know if he has by any chance ever given any kind of lesson to them in the past. The man stammers awkwardly, explaining that Captain Woldwan was absent today, so they thought the hero would teach the class. The students realize they were mistaken and begin to disperse, lamenting that they created false expectations with the leader's visit. The young leader turns and begins to walk away silently while the warriors return to their exercise routines. He reflects that training that group is necessary for his revenge, because without direction, they will just continue running in circles. The protagonist stops suddenly in front of one of the disciples and asks his name, receiving the answer Hien Chienho. The man stands still, holding his training weapon while waiting with great respect for the young leader's next command. With a thunderous war cry, the young warrior focuses all his determination to show what he really knows how to do. Chienho lets out a cry of determination while he begins to throw his strikes with the training staff in the sect courtyard. He executes several fast movements, but the young leader realizes that his technique is full of flaws and amateurism. The protagonist interrupts the training abruptly, ordering the man in a harsh tone to stop that immediately. Gasping from the great physical effort, Chienho asks with expectation what the master thought of his demonstration. The hero responds bluntly that the technique was terrible, as he did not demonstrate any real understanding of footwork. The warrior is extremely surprised and shocked to hear such harsh criticism coming directly from the young leader. He says that the man's movement is of a very low level, while McTay thinks the master is too merciless. the protagonist takes a step forward, leaving everyone around attentive and curious about what he intends to do now. He warns seriously that he will not repeat the demonstration and orders everyone to pay close attention to every movement. All the disciples swallow hard with anxiety, focusing their eyes so as not to miss any detail of what will come next. The young man begins his footwork in an extremely fast and silent way, making dust rise from the dirt floor. With a focused look, the young leader demonstrates a perfect posture while sliding nimbly through the training courtyard. He performs impressive spins and jumps, leaving a trail of dust and wind with his unbelievable speed. The protagonist slides his foot along the floor with mathematical precision, showing that he perfectly masters his balance. His movement is so refined that it seems to draw invisible lines of energy around his agile legs. He positions himself firmly and imposingly, revealing that each step has a hidden defensive and offensive function. The hero finishes the movement with a powerful punch in the air, releasing a strong gust of wind throughout the training courtyard. One of the students is left open-mouthed, observing that unusual footwork technique and wondering how he moves that way. The young leader stops in his final stance and asks the group calmly if everyone was able to see the movements. The warriors are completely amazed and admit, surprised, that his demonstration was fantastic and flawless. They begin to whisper, praising the master and commenting that they never expected to see such perfect footwork up close. The hero orders them to form a line and begin to repeat individually the path that he just demonstrated there. The students start to break into a cold sweat from nervousness, not knowing how they will copy such a complex movement after watching it a single time. Cheon-ho speaks up and explains, apprehensive, that footwork technique is something they have never learned to do before. The hero stares at him with a serious look and asks if they even know what the name of that basic movement is. The warrior asks if it is the same movement from the recent duel, and the hero confirms that it is the nameless steps. The young man confesses, discouraged, that they have not yet received permission or opportunity to learn this technique in the sect. The hero is surprised by the revelation, but the student explains that they just considered this movement to be minor training. The protagonist thinks, frustrated, that it will be very difficult to improve the sect with people who do not even master the basics of fighting. He warns that this technique is the foundation for overcoming any opponent and orders them to forget everything they learned before. The master points to Cheon-ho, ordering him to go first, and the young warrior trembles with nervousness at being chosen to start. Stammering a lot, the young man confesses shyly that, in truth, he cannot remember the steps of the demonstration. The hero stares at him, irritated, stating dryly that he hates it when people make excuses before they even try to do it. The protagonist demands in a loud voice that he stop wasting time and start the exercise immediately, once and for all. The disciple takes a deep breath to try to calm his anxious heart while he prepares to take the first steps. Upon looking closely at the sand in the courtyard, the young warrior lets out an exclamation of complete surprise at what he sees. He realizes that there are perfectly aligned marks on the sandy ground, forming a clear sequence to follow. The young man understands, shocked, that those clear footprints were left on purpose by the master during the demonstration. He deduces, amazed, that the hero used his immense internal energy to sink the sandy ground with surgical precision. The protagonist rushes him, shouting for him to stop dawdling and start stepping on those marks drawn on the ground immediately. The disciple gathers courage and takes his first step, fitting his foot exactly onto the hero's first footprint. He tries to continue the path, but realizes immediately that maintaining balance and the correct distance is very difficult. The companions in the audience begin to cheer for him, saying that seeing it from afar, the task does not seem so impossible. Focused on the task, the young warrior exerts himself to the limit, coordinating his body movements with great seriousness. The hero offers a slight smile, realizing that the young man's performance is not all that bad for a first try. However, when trying to make a quick turn, the boy's legs end up crossing in a totally awkward way. Unable to maintain stability, the boy falls to the ground, raising a large cloud of dust as he lands on his back. The protagonist observes the fall and thinks to himself that despite the tumble, the boy's effort was quite impressive. He looks away with indifference and calls out to the next one in line, ordering that the training continue without any pause. The next disciple steps forward with a clenched fist and responds, full of determination, that he will do his best. Another student tries to follow the footprints, believing the task will be very easy, but also ends up losing his balance. He falls heavily on his back on the sandy ground, and the young leader shouts impatiently, calling for the next one in line. Another warrior goes to the ground, hitting his face in the sand while the master orders them to continue the tests without stopping. Observing the disastrous situation, the protagonist lets out a tired sigh, thinking he has a long road ahead of him. The students comment, frustrated, about everyone's failure, but admit that Chi and Ho managed to advance almost to the halfway point. The hero approaches the group and states firmly that that poor result shows their true current level. He warns seriously that from today on, any other training is prohibited and no one will even be allowed to touch a sword. The young leader explains this prohibition will continue until everyone manages to complete one full lap on the footprints. He promises that he will give personal teachings to the warriors who manage to complete the difficult task in 4 days. The students are extremely excited by the promise and shout, saying that their special training will start today. The hero praises their enthusiasm, but knows in silence that the path is too complex to be mastered so quickly. The hero surprises everyone by decreeing that from today on, no one else will need to continue with their common jobs. The disciples fall into complete despair, not understanding how they will get money to survive without their salary. The young man explains that the sect will pay for all housing and food, so that they can focus only on martial training. The news leaves all the warriors speechless, and they ask, shocked, if the young leader is really serious. The protagonist confirms with authority and says that his father has already approved the new routine, focused only on martial evolution. He explains that the strength of each one represents the power of the sect, and the students can barely believe such generosity. The warriors begin to celebrate happily, shouting words of gratitude and vows of loyalty to their sect leader. The hero grumbles in his thoughts, finding amusement in the celebration, since he is the one funding everything with his own gold. Macte appears, shouting in the courtyard to notify everyone the hero is the only one responsible for covering their entire new routine. Knowing the truth, the group celebrates even louder, swearing that they will follow every order of the protagonist with eternal loyalty. Embarrassed by the scandalous shouting, the protagonist tries to make the servant stop that excessive bootlicking in the courtyard. However, the hero accepts the situation, thinking that it is indeed good that the warriors know where their support is coming from. He leaves, thinking that all of this is part of his great revenge against the feared heavenly demonic cult. The hero knows that every current effort is a valuable investment for the future, while the night covers the silent temple. In the illuminated inner courtyard, the protagonist trains his strikes intensely in the middle of the night, focusing on technical perfection. Suddenly, Mac peeks out, scared, through the crack in the wooden door and asks if the young leader really called him there. Sweaty from the heavy training, the young man turns around, shirtless, and orders the servant to come in right away so they can talk in private in the room. The hero points to a wooden bench in the corner of the hall and orders the humble servant to sit there without ceremony. The servant walks in suspiciously and asks, apprehensive, the reason he was called for a secret meeting so late at night. With a focused look, the hero orders the man to remain completely motionless, leaving the poor employee very scared. The hero approaches quickly and holds the man's shoulder firmly, initiating an unexpected physical analysis of him. He begins to feel the servant's back, testing the muscular rigidity and the bone structure of the man's body in silence. The servant begins to sweat from pure nervousness, not understanding why the master is touching him in such a strange way. With red cheeks, he falls into despair, imagining that the hero has hidden romantic intentions behind that. The protagonist stares at him with an expression of pure disgust and asks, irritated, what kind of nonsense he is muttering there. The hero holds his shoulders firmly and orders the boy to shut up so that he can examine the musculature calmly. The servant remains very tense and swallows hard from nervousness, fearing that the master might end up discovering some terrible secret of his. The protagonist makes a shocked face and asks, indignant, how the boy managed to live with a body in such a poor state. He explains that he wanted to test the servant's aptitude for martial arts, but the man is shocked by the possibility. The young leader reveals that his bones and meridians are naturally incredible for energy cultivation. But there is a catch. The servant widens his eyes, shining with hope to hear that he could indeed have the potential to become a warrior. However, the hero explains that the potential is buried under layers of fat and impurities, making the servant begin to cry. The protagonist is quite confused and asks, irritated, for what reason that fool started crying all of a sudden in the room. The man cries with emotion, asking if someone of such a low class as he really has permission to train in fighting. The young leader remains silent for an instant, surprised and a little touched by the deep emotional reaction of his servant. He tells the servant not to worry about that, as the patriarch of the sect has already given full authorization for his training. The servant throws himself to his knees, thanking him through tears, but the hero says impatiently that the main problem is not the permission. He warns seriously that rebuilding his body for combat will require training with unbelievable pain. Still crying, the servant raises his head with determination and guarantees he is willing to die to manage to learn how to fight. Protagonist tosses a small paper bundle containing a precious item and orders the servant to catch it in the air, once and for all. Macte holds the small wrapped package, quite confused, and asks the master what exactly is stored inside. The hero explains that it is a legendary spiritual pill capable of purifying and greatly amplifying the body's internal energy. Without hesitating for even a second, the hungry servant puts the pill directly into his mouth and swallows it all at once in a hurry. The young leader is astonished by the speed of the action and complains, finding it amusing how his assistant is extremely greedy. Macte asks for forgiveness on his knees, claiming that he acted without thinking, but the hero says that out of politeness, he should have refused at the beginning. Protagonist observes him calmly and thinks to himself that the man must be truly desperate to learn how to fight. The hero positions himself right behind the servant sitting on the floor to initiate the process of channeling all the energy of the elixir. He places his hands on the man's back, warning that he will guide the internal energy released by the pill he just swallowed. The young leader orders him to memorize the path that the energy takes and warns that the servant will need to practice this meditation every day. He warns severely for the man not to open his mouth under any circumstances, even if the pain of the process is unbearable. The boy orders him to hold on tight, even if he feels blood rising up his throat, as that is a very old secret technique. A strong golden energy begins to circulate around the two, while the hero guides the flows of force through the assistant's body. Sweat runs down the servant's face, while a little blood begins to come out of his nose due to the immense heat of the process. The master warns that the process has finished and orders the man to spit out immediately the dark blood accumulated in his injured throat. The young man spits out the dark liquid, and the protagonist explains calmly that that black blood represents the impurities in his body. The master warns seriously that he must never reveal this technique to anyone, and the man agrees, injured but very relieved. The hero complains about the unpleasant smell and orders the servant to clean all the mess from the training hall floor before going to sleep. Meanwhile, the silent night covers the sumptuous headquarters of the White Dragon Sect, where new plans are being made. Proud Jum Salmon appears imposingly at the top of the stone staircase, observing the nighttime movement in his sect's courtyard. Being the second in command in the White Dragon Sect, he is known for being an extremely strong and very dangerous warrior. He goes down the stairs and asks directly to one of his henchmen if all the ordered goods have already been prepared. The masked henchman with a scar on his face confirms with much respect, guaranteeing that their plan was executed to the letter. He reveals that almost all the wooden swords in the rival sect's warehouse have been replaced with exact replicas. Jum Salmon takes one of the fake wooden swords and examines the handle of the weapon with an expression as of surprise and distrust. He begins to spin the weapon in the air to test the balance and wonder if that is really just common training equipment. The informant in black challenges him with a mysterious smile, suggesting that the commander himself perform an impact test with it. With a quick movement full of force, the warrior delivers a sword strike in the air against one of the targets in the training courtyard. The wooden sword shatters into several pieces upon impact, revealing a frightening fragility. He is amazed, looking at the broken handle of the wooden weapon, realizing that it looked perfectly normal in his hands. The commander praises the quality of the clandestine work a lot, finding the result of the disguise truly spectacular. The warrior thanks him for the impeccable service and asks the henchman which of the fake swords he should choose for combat. The informant points to the weapon rack and orders him to choose specifically the fifth wooden sword counted from the left. Satisfied with the answer, the warrior promises a generous reward to the man if everything goes according to plan tomorrow. However, the henchman with the scar notices a sudden intense change in his superior's threatening tone at that instant. The commander warns coldly that if there is any error in the plan, the man with the scar will pay with his life for that serious failure. The informant swallows hard and makes a formal salute, guaranteeing that he will transmit this warning message to his secret leader. The blonde warrior is left alone in the middle of the empty courtyard of the White Dragon Sect, observing the weapon rack under the light of the night. He focuses his gaze on the broken sword, thinking that the work was so perfect that even an experienced fighter would fall for the trick. He knows that even someone highly trained in wooden swords would not notice the fragility without examining the weapon very closely. He plans that even if the rival group gets suspicious, they will have no way to prove anything against the power of their influential sect. With an evil smile, he celebrates, thinking that tomorrow the rival sect and the young leader Dan Woliak will be crushed without mercy.